Crack that baby.
Open that now, so you're good.
This is Jason Anderson, Chairman of the Killeen Town Council, and we're calling this regular Town Council meeting to order. It is currently 7:02 p.m. on April 12th, 2022.
I would ask Ms. Wakefield to do the prayers.
Would you open this?
Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day. Thank you for the spring weather and the rebirth that we're seeing day in and day out as it gets nicer and the weather becomes sweeter and we're able to enjoy the beauty of your creation, Lord. Give us wisdom as we go about the town's business tonight and give us just your wisdom, Lord. I ask this in your name.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now raise absent with notification. We use virtual.
For roll call purposes, all council members are in attendance. Mr. Wood is attending virtually. Moving on in the agenda, we'll move on to item 5, adoption of minutes of previous meetings. Can I get a motion to adopt the special town council meeting minutes from March 1st, 2022, from March 6th, 2022, and the regular town council meeting minutes from March 8th, 2022?
So moved. Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Wakefield, seconded by Mr. Grandelski. Any comments, corrections?
Mr. Anderson, I have one correction that I noticed on the special town council minutes for March 6th. I believe Mr. Whitehead was absent for that one with notification. That was the goal-setting session. So I think the minutes only reflect Mr. Grandelski absent with notification, so.
Thank you. Any other comments, corrections? All those in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Moving on in the agenda, next item up is 6A, proclamation recognizing April 2022 as Alcohol Awareness Month. Whereas Alcohol Awareness Month is a national public health awareness campaign sponsored by the National Council for Alcoholism and Drug Dependency, NCADD, developed by Marty Mann in 1987 to increase awareness and understanding of both the causes and treatment of one of our nation's top public health problems, alcoholism. And whereas Alcohol Awareness Month provides an opportunity to educate communities about the dangers of unsafe alcohol consumptions and decrease stigma and misunderstandings to break down barriers to treatment and recovery. And whereas alcohol is the most used substance by youth and adults, and an estimated 95,000 people, approximately 261 per day, die from alcohol-related cases annually. And whereas according to the National Institute of Health's National Survey on Drug Use and Health shows nearly 15 million people ages 12 and older had alcohol use disorder, with the emerging trend of high-intensity drinking defined as consuming alcohol at levels 2 or more times the gender-specific binge drinking thresholds. And whereas we know that individuals and families have experienced significantly increased stress during the pandemic, along with fear and anxiety, causing strong emotions and leading to increased use of alcohol, which makes it important to know that telehealth and other online supports are available, accessible, and effective. Now therefore be it resolved, the Killenly Town Council does hereby recognize April 2022 as Alcohol Awareness Month and urges citizens to learn about the dangers of excessive alcohol consumption and alcohol use by youth. Also to learn about available treatment options and reach out to friends and family that might be at risk. Killenly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killenly, Connecticut, this 12th day of April 2022. We'll move on in the agenda to item 6B, proclamation recognizing April 2022 as World Autism Awareness Month. Whereas autism affects an estimated 1 in 54 children and 1 in 45 adults, and is a complex disorder that affects each person differently, resulting in unique strengths and challenges. And whereas autism can cause challenges with verbal and nonverbal communication, social interaction, and repetitive behaviors, and can affect anyone regardless of age, race, ethnicity, gender, or socioeconomic background. And whereas autism is often accompanied by medical conditions that impact quality of life, and whereas a comprehensive, collaborative approach will help to advance research providing a better understanding of many forms of autism, while strengthening advocacy efforts and ensuring access to services and resources throughout the lifespan. And whereas early diagnosis and intervention tailored to individual needs can have lifelong benefits, easing the transition to adulthood and fostering greater independence. And whereas each person and family affected by autism should have access to reliable information, supports, and opportunities to live up to their greatest potential. And whereas the town of Killenly is honored to take part in an annual observance of World Autism Awareness Month to address diverse needs of individuals and families affected by autism. Now, therefore, the Killenly Town Council does hereby recognize April 2022 as World Autism Awareness Month, and we call this observance to increase understanding and acceptance of people with autism spectrum disorder. Killenly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killenly, Connecticut, this 12th day of April 2022. Next up on the agenda, item 6C, proclamation recognizing April 2022 as Distracted Driving Awareness Month. Whereas distracted driving can result in injuries and deaths to motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists, and whereas the health and well-being of Killenly citizens are a direct result of increased awareness about the dangers of distracted driving, and whereas distracted driving occurs when drivers divert their attention away from the task of driving to focus on another activity, and such distractions endanger drivers, passengers, and bystanders' safety. And whereas 80% of all crashes and 65% of all near crashes can be attributed to some form of driver distraction. And whereas it is estimated that 1.5 million crashes per year can be attributed to cell phone use while driving. And whereas distracted driving is a serious life-threatening practice that is preventable. And whereas in order to reduce the number of crashes and improve driver safety, Killenly motorists should dedicate themselves to adopting and maintaining safe behavior while behind the wheel. Now, therefore, the Town Council of the Town of Killenly does hereby proclaim April 2022 as Distracted Driving Awareness Month and call this observance to the attention of all citizens, encouraging all citizens to increase their awareness of the dangers of distracted driving and promise to protect each other on the road through distraction-free driving behavior. Killenly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killenly, Connecticut, this 12th day of April 2022. Next up is item 6D, Northeast States Emergency Consortium 2021 Connecticut Emergency Manager of the Year Award for Randy Burchard, Killenly Emergency Management Director.
If I may bring Mike Caplet up to the podium to make this presentation. Mike Caplet is from Region 4 DEMIS. He is our primary coordinator, so I appreciate you making this presentation.
Thank you.
My pleasure, thanks. Again, my name is Mike Caplet. I'm the Region 4 Coordinator for the Connecticut Division of Emergency Management, Homeland Security, Department of Emergency Services, Public Protection. Here tonight to present the 2021 Emergency Manager of the Year for the Northeast States Emergency Consortium. This award, the 2021 Emergency Manager of the Year for the Northeast States Emergency Consortium, is presented annually to individuals who have made outstanding contributions in the field of emergency management. The Northeast States Emergency Consortium is comprised of State of Emergency Management Directors from Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, New York, and New Jersey. This year, for 2021, we're honoring Randy Burchard, Emergency Management Director for the town of Killingly. You can come stand while I continue to talk about you. And make me look extremely short. Thank you. Randy Burchard is being recognized as Emergency Manager of the Year for his past and continued service to his town of Killingly and to the surrounding communities of northeastern Connecticut, as well as all of Region 4. Region 4, for your awareness, is approximately the eastern third of the state of Connecticut. Randy has been the town of Killingly's Fire Marshal and Emergency Management Director since 2013. He's well respected by his peers and is a trusted resource who the northeastern Connecticut emergency management community in Connecticut look to for guidance and leadership. Randy is always willing to assist in coordinating regional training and exercise programs. Over the last 2 years, during our response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Randy has gone above and beyond his regular duties to support our regional response by coordinating our northern point of dispensing in Killingly. Working with my office and our Connecticut National Guard partners, as well as his regional partners, Randy personally coordinated countless operations of personal protective equipment distributions to first responders, as well as thousands of food boxes to our nonprofit partners as part of the Farms to Family Food Box Distribution Program. He also coordinated the use of donated refrigerated trailer, without which we would not have been able to accomplish the mission. Randy has also worked with FEMA to provide a regional vaccination clinic, which provided a much-needed resource of vaccines for the area. The logistics and on-site coordination required for that level of work is very significant. Randy's been a vocal supporter of our programs for acquisition and maintenance of regional assets. We all have the highest personal and professional respect for Randy and all of his accomplishments. On behalf of the Connecticut Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security Deputy Commissioner Brenda Burchard and the State of Connecticut Emergency Management Director William Turner, I am pleased to present Randy Burchard with the 2021 Emergency Manager of the Year Award for the Northeast States Emergency Consortium. Congratulations. Oh, you should say a nice word or two.
Thank you very much. The last couple of years have been hard on everybody, and I always say we're only as good as the people below us, and if it wasn't for everybody else, we wouldn't be here today. If it wasn't for Mr. Mike behind us helping me through, I probably wouldn't be standing up here. So, thank you.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I'd also like to thank his peers in the emergency management team that have come out tonight to support him in getting this award. I really appreciate your participation in this, so thank you for coming out.
On behalf of the town council, I just want to thank Mr. Burchard for his dedication to this town. You're a very valuable asset to this community, and you do a lot for this community. I know a lot of times people in your position don't get thanked enough for what you do. And on behalf of the council, thank you very much. Moving on in the agenda, we'll now move on to item 6E, Killingly Parks and Recreation Volunteer of the Year. And Ms. Gloria, I believe you had someone who's going to present?
There's a proclamation you can read off, and then we'll have we'll have the plaque that you can present. The plaque is right there.
Thank you. Killingly Parks and Recreation Department 2021 Volunteer of the Year. Whereas Parks and Recreation programs are an integral part of our community and essential to its spirit. And whereas Teague Thompson Economical Empowerment Group has contributed many volunteers to the Killingly Bike Night event over the past 7 years, one of the largest area events, which also serves as a fundraiser for the Killingly Parks and Recreation Department, Killingly Brooklyn Rotary, and the Teague organizations. Whereas the event would not be possible without the tremendous number of volunteers to help coordinate and facilitate the day to keep residents and visitors safe and informed throughout their time in Killenly. In addition, that Teague helps to support many families in the northeast portion of Connecticut with services and programs and caring for the local communities. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Town Council of the Town of Killenly to recognize Teague as the recipients of the 2022 Volunteers of the Year Award for the Killenly Parks and Recs Department. Be it further proclaimed that the Town Council agrees all citizens to see how, urges all citizens to see how they can help their community by volunteering their time and knowledge. Killenly Town Council, Jason Anderson, Chairman, dated at Killenly, Connecticut, this 12th day of April, 2022.
Gotta get everybody.
Moving on in the agenda. Next item up is 6F, presentation of the Water Pollution Control Authority fiscal year 22 to 23 budget.
Good evening, all. Members of the council, everybody that may be viewing at home, my name is Dave Capascione. I work in the engineering department. And joining us tonight is the chairman of the Water Pollution Control Authority, Patrick McLaughlin. In your packets and on the screen is a copy of the proposed Water Pollution Control Authority budget for 22-23. I'd like to mention before we get started that the proposed budget does not have a rate increase for the sewer users.
Second year in a row.
Yep. Okay.
There's no pictures.
No, okay, next slide, please, Jen. There we go. I'm not sure if anybody can see that, but I'll give a brief overview of the expenditures. Starting at the top, just printing and advertising and postage, which, pretty standard. Small item for professional development. The contractual services and support line goes to fund cleaning the wet wells or repair of pumps, small items like that. The contractual services office goes to cover the town staff. Contractual services, maintenance and equipment is just, for maintenance and, again, small items that we need to repair. The sewer line maintenance item would cover any repairs we need to do to the collection system, whether it would be a cracked manhole cover or a frame or possibly clearing some roots out. The sewer line below that brings us to professional services, which is the operation of the plant itself. Currently, that's pay the operators at the facility and the expenses associated with that. Data processing would cover our expenses in the revenue department for processing the bills. The next item is debt service transfer, and that's the odor control project, which is finally coming to a close as far as our debt payment. And then the next item would be for sewer replacement, and that was the USDA sewer line project in the downtown area, where we replaced over 10 miles of aging sewer lines. And then the Clean Water Fund for the Rogers Pump Station, which was rebuilt a few years ago. And the next two items are for the design of the construction of the upgrades to the plant, which we just completed. The following items were just debt issuance, property insurance, and contingency. Small item for office supplies and our capital projects for this year. We have an item with talking about repair of some smaller pump stations in town in the I Park, and some equipment and some work to the inflow and infiltration collection system in our lines to try to reduce our unnecessary inflow to the treatment plant, and some building improvements that were cut from the original facility upgrade project due to increases in prices. We also have an item for sewer line replacement, probably continue in the Prospect Street area, and a line item to continue funding our CNR account for replacement of equipment to amortize some funds. We had hit the existing CNR account pretty heavy to complete the facility upgrade in prior years. So the proposed expenditures are just over $6,900,000. Yep. And the next slide just shows a graphical representation of the expenditures, and you can see where professional services and the debt service for the Clean Water Fund project and other capital projects are the three largest items. Next slide goes a brief summary of our revenues, our sewer use charges, special work, which would be septage receiving, interest, and various liens that might come in. This year there is no fund balance appropriation, and again the revenues match the expenditures. And the next slide shows a summary of the sewer use charges, where it shows Frito-Lay, which is roughly 40% of the sewer use charges, roughly 46%, I should say. And it goes through, Rogers Corporation, some metered accounts, residential accounts, and our agreement with Brooklyn. Yep. And the next slide just goes over the capital projects that were shown in the expenditures on the first page in a little more detail. Again, it shows the capital projects with equipment, pump stations, the I&I, and various building work, sewer line replacement, and our capital non-recurrent, our CNR. And that pretty much summarizes the capital budget, the proposed budget for the year. I don't know if there are any questions. I'll do my best to answer them.
I do have one question. You said the sewer rates weren't going up. Where is the additional sewer use charges, which looks like it's roughly $760,000 coming from?
Mostly from the businesses in Brooklyn due to the structure of the agreements and the increased costs for projects at the facility. Well, not increased costs, but the costs due to the projects.
Okay,
Just
thank
the way,
you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions from council?
Just had one, Mr. Chairman. The cost for when someone goes to get their septic tank pumped, and I know the charge over here, at one point you had a high drop off on people that were coming to actually use that.
Mm-hmm.
That still isn't peaked, they're still on the decline, or is it?
It seems to have, over the last couple of years when we were doing the construction project, access was restricted.
Yep.
Other wastewater plants in the area do charge cheaper rates, so I think that's where people are going. Plus, there was a company that bought up a lot of the smaller septic haulers companies, and they're based out of Massachusetts, so I think that's where they're going. I think there's a combination of things why the revenue has dropped off in that area.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments from council? We'd like to thank you both for that presentation.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Dave.
Have a great night.
Moving on the agenda, Next item up is 6G, presentation of proposed revision to library fines and fees policy.
So if I may start this process, I'm bringing Claudette Stockwell, our library director, is going to come up and do the presentation that we presented to the fiscal subcommittee. So the library had started evaluating the possibility of potentially eliminating late fines, not all fees. So, when a book is considered lost, there's then a fee, a lost book fee, or a damaged book fee that's assigned to recoup that lost cost. This is if somebody returns the material late. So she did a extensive evaluation on this that was presented to the fiscal subcommittee. There is an agenda item later on in your agenda around for you to potentially take action on this revised plan. But the fiscal subcommittee did recommend this revised plan to the town council for approval. So if Claudette can kind of review the overarching, why did we look at this and all of a sudden your slides disappeared. I don't know what happened to the slides. Okay.
Is it on?
It's not.
Oh, do you have
Now
to
you're
push
on.
it?
Yes, now you're
Okay.
on.
Hi.
You don't have to keep it pushed, but yes,
Okay, now I'm like super loud, so.
it's okay.
Okay, so should the library go fine-free? So as Mary just said, there is a difference between fines and fees, and a lot of times people end up getting fines because they return their items late. That could happen for a variety of reasons, and very quickly and easily, as if we can get through the slide, you'll see how quickly we can block services to people. It only takes $5. So even though books may not seem like a lot, if you're only getting 15 cents a day for a fine, if you're borrowing one DVD, it's $1 a day. So in 5 days, you're not using the library services anymore until you pay us. And if something happens to a family that borrows 25 books or 50 books, you can imagine how quickly that adds up. Sorry. And I guess you're not really going to see the actual PowerPoint. So anyways, that's pretty much what that is. That's okay. So I feel like for any family that has a fixed income, and even if you don't have a fixed income, everything is very expensive today. And I think it's a sad state of affairs if people need to come to the library and can't access actual materials due to fines. This is not to say that if you don't return our items or if you return them damaged that we want to ignore that. We definitely want to collect those fees to replace our items. It's embarrassing for people when they come to the front desk. They might not realize they might have returned a stack of books, but maybe they just missed one and they're with their kids. You could have a family of 3, a stack this big. You get to the front desk and we go, "Oh, sorry, you owe us." And now you've got 3 kids like, "What do you mean, Mom? I can't take this out." And it's not just parents. It happens to people that are up in age. And it's not a good feeling. And, because it would be difficult for all my staff to decide, who's worthy and who isn't of forgiveness, then they have to make an appointment with me and tell me sort of their, why did this happen to me story. And I think it just creates an obstacle for families.
I think we're there with the PowerPoint.
Yes, we are here now. Excellent. So that's some of the differences as we go backwards. What's the difference? The difference is that these are people that have indeed returned their items. They just return them late. So we can go on, Jen. So this is how fines are accumulated. $3 a day for museum pass, $1 a day for DVDs. Encyclopedias is 50 cents and 15 cents for all books and magazines. Okay. So I did present just a couple different scenarios of how quickly a bill can add up. At the end of 1 week, someone could potentially owe us almost $100. So imagine what 3 weeks looks like if you broke your hip and you're in the hospital. Thank you. So this is just another scenario because it's different people. You could have one individual or you could have a family of 4. And it may seem like 50 books is a lot, but it really isn't when you have 2 people and 3 children. Okay, next slide. Maybe. So that slide just pretty much says it just takes 1 day for someone to not be able to utilize our resources. As I stated earlier, it's just a financial burden. I think it's embarrassing for people. It creates ill will. And if they think that we're like the library police, they might not come to our programs because they might think we know that they owe us money, even though that's not the case. And then they might not bring their families, their children, or their grandchildren.
Next.
So the argument that I do hear a lot is, who will teach our children to be responsible? And I really do believe that it's actually their caregivers that should be teaching them responsibility. We're the institution that's promoting early literacy, encouraging lifelong learning, exploration, collaboration, communication, innovation, and there has been no evidence to suggest that somehow fines teach responsibility. Next slide. And I just put this in because I think that what it really distinguishes is people that can afford to actually pay fees and fines versus someone that cannot. I think that life just happens sometimes. I don't necessarily think that people are trying not to be responsible, especially because we're talking about items that have been returned. So I just think that stuff happens. The car breaks down, you get sick, you or yourself, your loved one ends up in a hospital, and you might not be thinking of us right away. And I think that libraries themselves should not actually be judging people on their behaviors. Next slide. So this is what it looks like fiscally for you. So in 2019, 2020, we had 2572.70 in fines. In 2021, we had 2105.28. And so far as of January 1st, when I started this presentation, we were at 2100. It's not really a sustainable form of revenue because there's no guarantee that at any point people are going to actually pay when we send them the bill. So we do get books and donations that would probably equal out to the loss of that revenue. And we're not trendsetters. This is not something that I just thought of. We're kind of the last one standings in the quiet corner to still charge fines out of just Connecticut, and this is nationwide. Libraries everywhere are realizing that this is becoming really, it's stopping people from accessing free services. Next slide, please. So I think some benefits to eliminating fines is we would definitely be able to remove some barriers. We would increase access. We would be able to build equity, increase participation in library events. I think it would spread some goodwill in the community. From what I hear and from studies that I've seen, in the end, more of your items end up being returned because sometimes people might just think, well, I can't afford to pay it, so I might as well keep them. And then children themselves are not punished for their parents' actions. People don't always realize, they think that maybe if they owe us money, it's okay if their kid comes to get a library card, but we don't allow that. So if your family is attached in our system and you owe us money, your child is not going to be able to get a library card. And that's really not fair for children that really have done nothing wrong. Next slide. So our current borrowing limits, as you can see, we allow people to borrow a lot for a pretty decent amount of time. Some suggestions from the fiscal subcommittee was to reduce the amount that people borrow and for the duration in which they borrow them. So I did propose those borrowing options. And my final thought would be that we would no longer charge for things that have been returned. We would still continue to charge people that did not return their items on time. So if they don't come back in that 14-day period, or for like DVDs, 7 days, or museum passes, they would still get a fee. But then if they brought it back, we would forgive that. Obviously, if they don't bring it back, we want that bill, and they're not gonna be able to have service. This would also relate with damaged items, and we would still continue to charge for copies, fax, and prints. And I just have some final thoughts on my last page, and that is to just review the mission of the Killingly Library, which is to help fulfill the educational and recreational needs of the community by providing free access to information and creative ideas through a variety of materials, services, and programs. Eliminating fines on overdue items would provide access to the library for everyone, and it aligns with the library's mission. Does anybody have any questions?
I do have one question.
Sure.
I don't know if you know the number off the top of your head. For the 2018 to 2019 fiscal year, do you know how many fines were collected that year?
I do
Because
not.
that would have been the last full year before COVID hit.
I do not know. I could try to get that for you. Yeah.
I don't have it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, whenever I submit stuff into the town, it's not broken down by fines versus copies and fees. That's all submitted into one deposit that I do weekly. I do have that record.
Yep.
Because that's how we do it when we break it down in the register, so when we are making sure the money's straight every day. But when I submit it to the town, it just submits as one sum.
Okay. I was just asking,
Yeah.
because looking at this, the 2019 to 2020 and then the 2020 to 2021, both those would have been impacted due to COVID.
Correct.
And then looking at the current fiscal year we're in, just the first half of the year was $2,100.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if going back, we're normally a normal non-COVID impacted
Mm-hmm.
year, if we're looking at $4,000 in fines.
It's possible. I'm not going to say that it isn't. It's a good possibility. I know that COVID did impact because we obviously forgave pretty much anybody that returned our stuff because there was a wider range. Some people immediately wanted to return our items. Some weren't sure. Some didn't feel safe. Some waited even several months after we were open. So we kind of wanted, and I mean, you're talking people that had our materials, some people for 6 months and still return them, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say that the 1920 year, only the last quarter would have been impacted by that, because that was when the actual impact occurred, so it wasn't the
That's
entire
true.
year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we
that would
still
have been
did collect
mid-March.
fines during
Yeah.
even that last, some people did pay some of that, so, you, likely, it wouldn't, it's not gonna be 4,000 in fines on an annual basis. That would be, I think, probably on the very high side. It's likely closer to 3,000 at the most.
I was just asking because I saw the up until January 1st, which would be
Yeah,
basically a
we're
half
getting
a
some
year.
good fines this year. I'm not going to say we're not. Hi.
Question,
Yeah.
how much material have we lost per year? What is the
Oh.
average?
Geez, I don't know. I would have to pull those reports from Bibliomation. Yeah, I can't really say 100% for sure.
You
We-
don't know what our replacement cost of people not returning?
Well, so, I mean, we don't really write those kinds of reports. Bibliomation that handles our stuff would probably be able to give me a printout of lost items, but it would probably be a printout for the last 5 years of things that haven't been returned. So we do kinds of different things at the library. If you donate an item, especially if it's something popular, so if it's a John Grisham new item, if for some reason that got returned, didn't get returned, chances are I'm going to buy another copy. But in the meantime, if someone donates it, we would enter that into the system. So it all depends on any item at any given time.
Right, because
Yeah.
I also see, like you say, if you have a popular item, somebody comes in and we have no fee-based schedule, you do have the 14-day. If it doesn't come back in a 14-day,
Right.
that's positive. But that actually takes that product, that literature, whatever, out of everybody else's hands. So
Correct.
everybody else pays that price for somebody not returning the item.
Right.
Yeah, that was
And-
one of the topics that we brought up with the
Because
other
normally,
libraries.
right, so normally, people, any new material, anybody would be able to borrow for 21 days, normally. Right now, if you went to the library right now and you took a new book off the shelf, you would have 21 days. You'd be able to renew it based on whether or not there was someone on that waiting list. So we're going to reduce that to 14 days. Most libraries, especially Thompson that I talked to because they've been doing it for a long time, I said, so how does this work? How do you do this, you know? Mary and I talked even after we met again at the fiscal subcommittee, like what exactly does that look like? You know, are we forgiving from now until the end of time? Or is there, you know, a 60-day limit? Or how do we do this? And I said, how have you been doing it? And she said, oh, we just forgive. We want our stuff back. If it's somebody popular, we're already knowing that ahead of time, and we already have an additional copy or two so that it is going out and coming back and we're not taking away. In addition, if you have a library card, your library card is good for anywhere in the state of Connecticut. So and it's a weird algorithm that they do, but if you put a hold on a book, you might get our copy, you might get a copy from Putnam, depending on how it kind of shakes out when it comes out into Bibliomation, and we just call and say your book's here. Yeah.
Okay. The only thing I respectfully disagree with you is the fines. I agree with you in the fact that you're not there to discipline the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But for fines, I mean, let's face it, speeding fines, seatbelt fines.
Right.
We all learn a lesson from fines. So
Mhm.
to say that nothing is being learned, nothing is being taught, in generality, yes, there is something being taught.
Oh, yeah, I didn't mean like that. I didn't think that it wasn't being taught, but what I think is that it's, if children are 3 years old, they're not bringing themselves to the library. Their parent is bringing them. So it's the parent that's really the one that's responsible for those items. And chances are, you know, they're hopefully 15, 16 and older before they're a parent. So hopefully they've learned some of those values moving up already. So I just feel like what happens a lot of times is children aren't allowed to borrow because of maybe sins of the father, right? And I think that for this situation, if someone's not returning stuff, we are going to hold them responsible because they are going to get a bill, and they're
14 days, right?
right.
Yeah.
So they're going to get that bill, and they're either going to bring that book back or they're going to have to pay us. It's just for the books that we already have. They're in our book drop. I might be reading it. You might be reading it. But now it stopped you from borrowing something, even though you did return it. It's just that it got returned late.
So after that
Yeah.
14 days, say the book costs $25,
Mhm.
would that be the fee for that?
So we
14
have
days, or if it comes back, everything's okay?
Right. Well, I guess it's going to depend on when it finally comes back. I mean, if it comes back in 6 years, that's not going to help us. But there's also a set fee. So Bibliomation, who we work with, sets a certain fee for each thing. So you're never going to pay more than the book is worth. So it's not going to be like this DVD is $9.99 and this one's $15.99. They set a set price, and that becomes the price for any of those items that go missing. And we certainly would take a replacement copy. So if you could go down to Pourings and Passages and get that same book for $2, we would take it as long as it was in good condition. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's when it was first brought up how we're gonna alleviate the fees and whatnot,
It's confusing.
I completely disagree with it.
Yeah.
But since you have the 14 days, and at least there is some kind of repercussions
Right.
for doing something wrong.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that I don't want people to be accountable.
Right.
I'm just don't want to punish the people that were accountable, but they were just late. Because it happens. I know it's happened to me.
Oh, 100%. Like I said, I paid
know.
lots of money to you guys.
Thank you. And I mean, feel free. And, I mean, some libraries can even, we can still welcome donations. So there's still other ways that we can, because some people might just pay out of guilt, right? Anyone that's old school enough is going to be like, I'm sorry I'm late, and here's my $5. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One thing I will say, when this came before fiscal subcommittee, we did have some concerns. We did have some recommendations, and you addressed those. You came back. One of the concerns was, if we eliminate fees, is there going to be a chance of less material available? And by reducing the amount of time and the amount of material that each person can have out, I believe that'll help alleviate that being a possibility, because my concern was, if somebody feels, I can keep this as long as I want because now I don't have a late fee, That was one concern that was brought up during the fiscal subcommittee. But the fact that we're reducing the amount of materials that someone can have. Now, if somebody finishes the materials, they can always come back out and get 25 more the next day. And also the fact of, I don't know if you would mention it in here, that once they reach a certain point, their card basically has a block on it. To where if they have late fees, if the material hasn't been returned and are past a certain amount of time, then at that point, they can't take out more material until they either pay for lost books,
Right.
lost material, or return it.
Yeah.
So there were certain things that fiscal subcommittee looked at, and we had some recommendations, and you did address those. You came back with a revised plan, and that's what we see before us tonight.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I'm still just a little bit confused. So they get
Sure.
14 days, and then the clock starts counting for 14 more?
No. So what happens is if you come in, and so I didn't give you the full breakdown on every item that circulates because each one's a
Oh,
little
just one,
different,
just so I
right?
understand.
No, but I mean, like a DVD is going to be different than a museum
Yeah.
pass and a a popular book versus a book that's been there for a while. But you'll come in, you'll check out your book. We're going to give you a due date card.
Yeah.
So let's say your due date is tomorrow, right? You're going to bring that home. When you first sign up for your card, we're going to ask you if you want to receive notices from us and how you would like to receive them. So would you like a phone call? Would you like a text? Would you like an email? So 3 days, depending on how you sign up, 3 days before your book is due, we're going to let you know your book's coming due.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, you're going to miss your due date. So
Yeah.
if your due date is tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? You've had your 2 weeks to borrow.
Yeah.
We're going to send that. We get a little thing in our emails, lets us know that these books are late. And then my circulation supervisor, she makes a little letter that says, please return this item. And then I come over here, I put a stamp on the bill, and I send it on its way. We're hoping that in the meantime, you're going to return it.
So then you've
Yeah.
got 14 days, and that's
Yes.
kind of what you're
Right,
waiving, and then
right.
after. I
Right.
was curious too, when I look at the fees, they are steep. Like I kind of weigh in with Andy that
Mhm.
if you were going to do away with them, I'd be against it, but this
Mhm.
doesn't sound that bad. Why wouldn't you cap them?
We do cap at the 5, so that's what happens is at $5, and I think you would ask me, Mr. Anderson, well, why not cap at 10? Because if 5 is difficult to pay, imagine if you came at 10, then it would just get even more escalated, at least.
Per item, is that what you said?
Oh, no, $5 stops your card. So it's only 15 cents for a book, it's $1 for a DVD.
So why cap it? Because then ultimately you're essentially waiving late fees anyway, right? What's the incentive?
Well, the difference is
Right.
$20 or $82.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
yeah, that
So-
82
it's
ends
the
up
volume.
after 3 weeks of being late.
It's the
Right,
volume. And
right.
so really what we're forgiving, what we're giving the grace period on is the 14 days after the item is due, right? The person has 14-day grace period before they get a bill for a lost item. It becomes then lost.
And then, after the 14 days, they return the books, the fee is waived.
Correct.
Correct, because we're trying to get our material back.
Right. That's the goal, is to
Yeah.
get the material back,
Right.
right? And
No,
so,
that's-
we've seen it a lot with, people that they end up in the hospital for, an extended period of time, and, some individuals, because they were late, they feel embarrassed and feel that they can't come to the library anymore, even though they were, a couple of days late. And so, this kind of gives that grace period. But then once it's 14 days overdue, it's now lost. And we need to get that back, right? We need to get the material back. And so they get the fee for the lost book. And if they then return the book, then we can eliminate that fee, right? If they don't return the book, they don't get to take anything else out until they pay for that lost book or whatever the material is. Whatever the item is that they lost, they have to pay for that cost.
And sometimes fines end up being more than what the actual item is worth.
Yeah.
So you could have a $5 children's book, but because you're 3 weeks late and you do owe us $80, that's why some people might just say, well, we'll just keep it because, it's not worth paying us $100. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now move on in the agenda. Next item up is 6H, presentation of proposed affordable housing plan.
So I'm going to have the staff members that worked on developing the affordable housing plan. So this was a statute, legislation that was put in place during last legislative cycle in 2021 for requiring each municipality to draft and submit a affordable housing plan. So the staff collectively, it was the planning and zoning department, our economic development office, as well as our community development office, met, also had meetings with other stakeholders to pull together. They really worked in utilizing our plan of conservation and development, which has just recently been approved and updated. So they really tried to pull information from that. So I'm going to turn this over to Anne Marie. She can present to you how they collaborated and pulled together our affordable housing plan. I will say that the original guidance that we received from the state on the required submission date was that it was due in July 1st. They subsequently sent out a revision and made it June 1st. So we thought we had a little bit more time. So it's a month sooner than we thought. But so tonight, what is on your agenda is looking for the council to schedule a public hearing date for May 10th, and then you would then potentially take action on the affordable housing plan on your May 10th meeting. So we're not looking at you taking action tonight on this draft plan. This would just be for setting a public hearing. The statute says that the council may hold a public hearing, so it is not a requirement to hold a public hearing, but I felt that that would, might be something you would want to consider doing. So I'll stop talking now and I'll let Anne Marie take it over.
Good evening, everybody. As you know, I'm Anne Marie. I'm the Director of Planning and Development. This was a project that we've been working on for quite a few months, trying to get this through. We were fortunate because we did do our Plan of Conservation and Development in 2020. So we were able to build upon that because we do have a section in our Plan of Conservation and Development that is concerned strictly with housing. So first off, why did we have to create, can I have the next slide, please? Why did we create an affordable housing plan? Well, basically, we created it because the state statute says that it is required. They said that you could keep it within your plan of conservation and development. However, they wanted more detail than what was in the plan. One of the things that they wanted was they wanted you to actually go out and do an affordable a housing statistics. What does your town look like with it? So that was not in our Plan of Conservation and Development because that's not a requirement of it. Next slide, please. How do we go about creating the plan? People think that this happens overnight. It does not. One of the first things we did was we reviewed Section 3.4 housing. That is out of the Plan of Conservation and Development. We also reviewed Appendix B, which was our community participation review. We reviewed the public survey. There was particular sections on the public survey that concerned with housing and housing needs. Then we had constant contact with stakeholders. We talked to people that use public or assisted housing. We talked to the people that were running public or assisted housing. We talked to employers. If you remember, you just went through a connectivity stakeholders meeting. A lot of the employers voiced their concerns during that stakeholders meeting. A lot of the employers voiced their concerns to Jill when she goes out doing her economic visits. And then we spoke, because we have the Planning and Development Office, we have developers and contractors that come in all the time. So we asked their view on the construction of various types of housing, of affordable housing and whatnot. And we did research. I read numerous articles regarding affordable housing in general. We did a web research on the newest and best designs. One of the things that's out there now is called Missing Middle Housing. I even bought that book, Missing Middle Housing. It's on my desk. I researched what did the state require, what did the state want, what is the state looking at? And then I went to like communities, what have like communities done? People with similar populations, people with similar demographics, thank you, just went blank. And if they did it, was it successful or wasn't it successful? So we did a lot of thinking back. Next slide, please. One of the things that they did want us to do was the community value statement, or to set a goal for the community. This is very close to the goal that was set out in our Plan of Conservation and Development. Basically, it's housing in both quantity and quality, and available for the full range of income levels for all ages, and inclusive of people with varying special needs. For all ages and inclusive of people with varying special needs was the only thing we added to this goal. Everything else was already in the Plan of Conservation and Development. And we, again, carried through saying that said housing should complement the positive natural and cultural characteristics of the town. Under Section 8-30A1, it said such plans shall specify how the municipality intends to increase the number of affordable housing developments in the municipality. Our answer to that is that the plan does list several policies. It does list several action items. And the staff does realize that they will be the frontline workers to make sure that the town does indeed follow through with with the said policies. Excuse me. We also say that it's staff's feeling, and we believe it's everybody's feelings, that safe, secure, and affordable housing is a basic human need for all individuals and for a community at large. Next one. Next slide. And so right now, we're just asking that the town council schedule a public hearing on the plan in May. As Ms. Claria has already told you, that is it's not a required, it says may hold a public informational meetings. And that the plan can take effect immediately, and a copy can be sent to the Secretary of Office and Policy Management. So, next step. And do I have any questions on this?
Yes, I do. Looking at the maps that were handed out, and I don't know if you can put those
I don't know if those
up
are
on there. I don't know if we have the slides available. The second map where you showed mapping of potential mill housing.
Right.
Looking at the three locations that are north of 101,
Okay.
did you, when you picked these, did you take into consideration the potential impacts to air pollution if the NTE facility is built? I believe those three will be within the significant impact area of particulate matter 2.5 and NOx, where they exceed EPA regulations.
We did not take the NTE, but these are the same possible mill housing sites that were done through the connectivity program that the economic development program brought in. And that's where we got that map, if there was something you wanted to say.
So a lot of it comes down to infrastructure, infrastructure improvement. So I'm not going to talk about for 2 hours about pavement, don't worry. But these mill locations have infrastructure. So there's sewer, there's water, in some cases there's gas. There's already roads, many of them are state roads or major town roads that connect up to them. So when you're looking at redevelopment of those properties for potential uses, our mill zones are really nicely done where it can have mixed use. So you can get some commercial, you can get some industrial use, as well as residential. Most of these sites would have to go through environmental studies and have some sort of environmental restrictions because of their past. But as far as other items with it, a lot of that would go to Connecticut Deep as being a larger entity for large-scale projects.
And also, you got to realize these are not definitive locations because you have the landowner you have to deal with. You have to see if there's a developer that's willing to come in, and again, you have to have the state approve it. So, but we're supposed to have some sort of potentials in our plan. So, when we went through the connectivity, this is what came up. They said they went through a whole region of where are the jobs, where are the people, where would it be the easiest to get the people to the jobs? Because that's one of the things that we found out through all of our research too as we're going through the affordable housing is one of the questions, and you'll see it is, that people say, how affordable is housing if you can't get your transportation to a place of employment? You could have, you could make it affordable, but if you can't afford a car, and again, to the connectivity program, we realized connectivity study, we realized that there was approximately 16% of the people in Killenly don't have enough cars for the people that are employed in their household. So, so the transportation becomes a problem. And we don't have that transportation mode. We don't have a direct bus line. We don't have, CT transit. We don't have any of that in here. So that's what part of the connectivity study was all about. So that's what we were looking at.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from council?
So there's a percentage that we need to have of affordable housing that, is this gonna change that percentage? We still meet that minimum requirement, I believe, right?
We meet that minimum requirement at 10.35%. The percentage is 10. There was an issue that we had. They were giving us credit for some assisted living units that were not ours. They were actually located in Brooklyn.
I remember Mary telling us about that.
Okay.
One of the other changes that happens with our affordable housing percentage is as we have additional developments around town and that are not affordable housing, that don't meet those qualifications, that changes that percentage. So as we have more developments that occur, our percentage of affordable housing decreases, right? So while we're currently meeting that, depending on development as it moves forward, we may not meet that in the upcoming years, right? So that's trying to find out what's that actual balance between having, accessible and affordable housing and just other mainstream housing, right? And it's not necessarily about developing affordable housing complexes as it is just having affordable housing stock. There's a number of ways a property can be affordable housing, right? And it's not just about a lot of people think affordable housing and think a complex, and that's not necessarily always the case with affordable housing. It could be properties that are deed restricted and that receive some level of subsidy on a deed restriction. So there's a number of different ways.
Right.
Doesn't always look the same, but that percentage, while we're at 10.3% right now, as we have future development, that we may drop below that simply because we've had other developments occur that don't meet those requirements, and we haven't developed any additional affordable housing to kind of keep that balance there.
There's actually two types of affordable housing. It's called naturally occurring affordable housing, and that's an example for what we have in town would be our secondary dwelling units. We designed the secondary dwelling units to be there for the in-law, for the grandparent, or for the young teenager that wants some independence but can't have independence. They may be some sort of physical disability, but they can live on their own, but they need a little assistance. So that would be a naturally occurring affordable housing, okay? Unfortunately, the naturally occurring affordable housing doesn't necessarily meet or qualify for our 10%, okay? What they're looking for is they're looking for something that has some sort of connection to some government financing. A good example of that is your first-time home buyer mortgage loan. You get through USDA, CFHA. That's considered part of towards your 10% because they consider that's a special mortgage loan set out there for a first-time home buyer. And I don't know how many of you did, but I had one of those.
And it's a good point to bring up that as people that have those mortgages refinance into conventional, it now comes off of affordable housing, right? So that's another component that can dramatically change your percentage of what's classified as affordable housing based on just the availability of people to be able to mortgage properties in conventional mortgage lending. As opposed to utilizing some of the government the government subsidized ones. And in the current market, we've seen fewer people utilize government-backed or government-subsidized financing pieces because they have higher inspection thresholds to get through in the closing process, and with how tight the market has been, typically those offers don't match up with some of the other offers that are on conventional-based mortgages, right? And so the conventional-based mortgage offer is the one that's accepted, right? So you have fewer of those government subsidy ones that are going out there, and people start to refinance, and they drop off of those government financed mortgages, or they pay it off, right? So those are other components that can dramatically change that percentage.
Now, I don't know if you can speak to this, but have we seen a drop-off in, like the CHFA, the government-backed mortgages, due to the skyrocketing prices of housing? Has that had an impact on it?
I don't know if I have a direct correlation on that. I will say, having, my son being a first-time home buyer and going through the process, he ended up, he had an option of using government-backed financing or using conventional. And in order to get the offer accepted, he needed to go conventional, just because of the amount of inspection requirements that go with it. And that we have an older housing stock, and that typically weighs into this, right? So I think that you're seeing generally, and these are generalizations, some people are still utilizing those government, the CHFA and those and the HUD-backed financing, but I think you're seeing a higher grouping if they can get qualified for conventional. I think they're trying to get that way just because of trying to get through those inspection processes, and to be competitive in those offer stacks that, when people are getting, 15 to 20 offers on a home,
Right.
that they have an option to choose from,
They want quick closings.
It makes a difference. So I think you're seeing less of those overall. Do I have statistical numbers to give you? I don't.
We do, page 4.
You do, page 4, there you go.
It's all part and parcel of us being on Connecticut's Affordable Housing Appeals Exempt Status List. Single-family CHFA USDA mortgages in 2020 were 188. In 2021, there were 167. So that's a decrease. They also expect that we will, I believe, within the next 5 years, I want to try to say it, everything I've been reading says that we could lose up to another 7% of our federally assisted housing units mortgages within the next 5 years. So that's an effect as well. As far as when, and there is a need. Affordable housing means, in the broadest of sense, that no one spends more than 30% of their total household income to maintain that household. Now, for the longest time, that was at 25%. It got changed to 30% back in the 1980s. There has been no revision to that. What people are saying now, through all this reading, is that there's a group of people out there that say that now we need to consider the transportation cost, because that's employment. How do people get back and forth to their employment? So there's a group of people out there that are saying that it should actually be raised up to 40%. So that's 40% of income. But if you can't have affordable housing in town, then what they're talking about is that means more money is going towards the housing, less money is going for, and I don't want to say educational, but it's for extras. Parents can't afford to bring their kids to the museums anymore. Parents can't afford, to bring them out to Sturbridge Village or Boston or
Library
whatever.
fees.
Library fees. I was going to stay away from the library fees.
Nice plug, Jonathan.
Excuse me, how does that correlate to rent base? Now, I'm assuming that rent base would be, because let's face it, 40% of a $100,000 home that actually sells for $250,000. I mean, you're already backwards into the property anyway. So you must be able to pick up in rent based.
There is something on that, Mary. That's more your. Mary abandoned
Brahm.
me.
That would be Mary Brahm.
There she is.
And I do have one quick question. So I know we talked about government-backed loans. Do VA loans fall under this category or not?
Yes.
No,
They do?
they do?
think
VA
so.
does?
It doesn't have
Yeah,
it in-
because,
not on the exempt list.
It wouldn't matter because most people, most sellers are not gonna take that. There's so many offers out there. It's amazing. My son's a real estate agent.
You would
so-
be
there's a
surprised
cap.
because of the fact of VA loan, there's so many less inspections.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, but
don't
there's a
need
cap on how much
appliances,
you
there's
can-
all sorts of stuff you don't need with a VA.
but there's a cap on how much you
Conventional is
can pay for a home under a VA.
Yes.
VA. So in today's market, houses are selling for way above what the cap is.
I have, and gathering information, it's continuous. I got this yesterday from a real estate agent that I know. In Windham County, they don't break it down by individual towns, but in Windham County, the median sales price for a house in January was $285,000. The average sales price for a house was $299,000. Okay? For a townhouse or a condo, which we are higher in our sale rate through other facts I was looking at, median sale price for a condo in January was $2,012.
For rental?
No, this is for a purchase. These are for purchase.
Okay.
And an average sales price is $245. So it's almost $246. In February, it's dropped down a little bit, but not that much. A single-family home in February, the median sales price was $265,000. The average sales price was $288,000. Your median sales price for a townhouse or a condo to buy was $235,000. Your average sales price was $269,000. Now, how many kids do you know coming out of school can afford that? How many newlyweds do you know can afford that? You know, you've got single parents out there that are trying to make ends meet.
I have a question. Maybe I'm way off base, but. we
Is
have
your mic-
people that have been in- oh. We have people that have been in their homes for years and years and years. They're coming to Mary Brahms in her programs. How does that affect this? If someone applies to your program, does that give us credit to this? But they're not on the radar. This is because then they're not buying the house.
Mm-hmm.
But they're living there, they're making ends meet, they're doing without, so they're completely, they don't get credit for this.
No, and we don't get credit for that either,
No.
because there's no deed restriction
On the
for
property.
40, on the property for 40 years. That's the requirement. That
Right.
you have to have a deed restricted property for 40 years.
Meaning that you can't sell it, or?
No, it means that you have to sell it, you have to cap the price at, I believe it's 80% of the median, that somebody from 80% of the median income can afford. And I also have those balances in here somewhere. I have that sort of stuff. A lot of this was gathering information.
Well, again, these same people, they wouldn't even know that they should have something, I don't know, I may be missing something.
And they may not, an average individual that has been in their home for a long time may not want to put on a deed restriction that's
Right.
going to cap their availability of sale price of their home, going, in the near future, right? I mean, that's an individual choice, but when you look at the overall housing availability, it's making sure that we are trying to balance and have stock in the town for all income levels, right?
Mhm,
And
all ages.
including those, early workforce people that are just, entering the workforce or, transitioning through workforce or whatever that looks like, right? But, the definition of what they classify as affordable income, it doesn't capture
Yeah.
all of what we would think of as affordable, right? That's not the definition of the state. And so you can't, we don't get to count a lot of these other things that we would think of as affordable. We have to go by what their definition is, which is pretty
Yeah.
limited.
Naturally occurring affordable housing does not count.
So back
Make
to
it zero.
the rent question.
Okay, so 20 years ago, when I moved to town, the rents were extremely affordable. Today, if you could find an apartment, it's
it's probably not gonna be affordable to anybody that would wanna rent it. So again, affordable means that you're only paying 30% of your gross income towards your housing costs, which is rent and utilities. And in a rental situation, it also means that the landlord is renting for
A certain price.
the unit based on bedroom size, not to exceed the fair market rent minus any utilities that the tenant pays for. So you would get a credit back for utilities that you're required to pay for. The fair market rent for this area is really low, substantially lower.
I have it here. For fair market rent for the year 2022, for an efficiency is $848.
That includes all utilities.
For a one-bedroom, $854.
Again, these numbers include all utilities, and so there's utility allowances that are set by the state that, for example, if you rented your one-bedroom apartment and the tenant paid all utilities, so that's heat, electricity, hot water, basically, there would be credits given to the tenant, so a one-bedroom apartment with those credits would probably be around $650 a month. So if you're able to get $1,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, you're not gonna rent to you're not gonna have an affordable unit.
Are there incentives for a developer that wanted to put up an apartment complex-ish?
Ye-
Are there
Yes, it's very
financial
competitive.
benefits?
There are financial resources in the state, that the state has. They're very competitive. But you can get them, yeah.
The big thing with the state is not going to talk to a contractor who's never developed this before. They're not going to give them hundreds of thousands of dollars if they've never developed. They go with the people that know what they've done. And that's why, again, we can't say exactly where or what, because we have to talk to the landowners. First off, we have to have willing landowners. Second off, we have to have a willing developer. And third off, we'd be remiss if we didn't check to see that that developer hadn't had some sort of credit or standing with the state where the money's coming from. Because we could put in a lot of time, effort, planning, money, and then it never happened.
And it's way more expensive to develop affordable units than it does market rate units, obviously, because the return is going to be a lot less. And so the subsidy required to build affordable units is greater. But this town, even though this town is relatively affordable compared to all of the towns or many of the towns surrounding us, this town needs a good deal more affordable housing.
We looked at, again, we talked to some people in the public housing, people who were running the public housing. They have a waiting, this is just one of our many, or one of our 7 that we have. They have a waiting list of 140 people. Out of that 140 people, approximately, I think they said somewhere between 55 to 60% are single elderly women or young handicapped.
Bringing in less than $1,000 a month. So the housing authority can only charge a rent of not to exceed 30% of their gross income. And they have deductions for medical, and they have medical deductions that they can take. So the problem is that if you have a young disabled person on disability bringing in $800 a month, when you start doing those calculations, the amount that they can afford for a rental, there's no rentals in town that can house them to meet the definition, their definition of only paying 30% of their income towards rent. And it's a serious problem throughout the state, throughout the country.
So that's, what we have. I want to refer you back again to the graph or chart that's on page 4. I want you to note that when it says census data, that has not changed since 2011.
Hang on a second. So she's referring
To the affordable
your
housing
actual item, agenda item at the bottom, at the end of your packet. So if you go to item 15I, the very last piece of your item, of your packet, that's the actual affordable housing plan. So go to the
That's
very,
the draft of it.
the very end of your packet that we gave you has the actual agenda item, and that is the page 4 that she's referencing. Nope, you weren't. You're
Sorry.
good.
So from 2011 to 2021, the census data is 7592. The census data is supposed to be the number of units in the town itself, the total number of units in the town. We don't know what the census data actually came out to be in 2020. So when they get the actual 2020 numbers, that 7592 could change. It could go up. If that 7592 number changes, it goes up. We had an estimate, and we had another estimated number. We go down to 10.03% if it's the number we think it's going to come out to be. So this is something that we really need to do if we want to make it compatible to our community. We really have to work on this. This is a plan that we need to have in place. And staff knows it's not going to just take planning. It's not just going to take CDBG. It's going to take the economics. It's going to take all of us. That's why all 4 of us put our names on this document.
And the goals that are outlined and the actions that are outlined in the plan are not setting firm numbers or firm percentages. This is really identifying steps and processes that we can evaluate and look at, but it's not restrictive in where we're setting, a percentage that the town ultimately, we may not be in control of meeting that. We're not the ones physically developing housing, right? There's a lot of collaborative effort that has to go into this, and again, as Anne Marie has mentioned several times, it takes developers and property owners that are engaged in that process, right? So we purposely developed the plan without setting those restrictive action plans, but rather leaned more towards the action plans developed in our POCD. That is a bit more flexible and gives that ability to be able to plan through, but keep it as a, on the forefront of policy.
Question. So that's, the 10% is a goal, right? It's not a mandatory goal, it's a goal.
It's a goal. It keeps you on the exempt list. It keeps you out of what they call statutory 8-30G.
So what's the
Which
repercussions?
is the repercussion, well, there's not repercussions per se. I don't want to put it as a repercussion. But if you're not on the exempt list, right now we're on the exempt list, which basically means that if there's a developer that comes in town and they want to do the affordable housing, trust me, we're going to work with them because we know we need it. Okay, that's not a problem. We understand that. But if there's something in the plan that we say is not health-wise, public safety-wise, they can take us to court. And if the court finds they can do an appeal of our decision, even if we say we want you to do, instead of Plan A, we want you to do Plan B. Well, if they're stuck on Plan A, they can still bring us to court. And if the court finds that Plan A doesn't meet any of the criteria of making it public health, safety, or welfare, and sometimes it's a high threshold depending on the court system, then the Plan A will go through, even though we know Plan B would be a better plan for the town.
So if we're above the 10%, that kind of gives us some.
Right, that gives us,
leeway.
I put it as, that puts us in control of the script.
Okay.
That's the way, and that's the way that's the way we want to be. We've been as high as 14%, 14+% as affordable housing. But now we're with and part of it is the COVID, part of it is the, fluctuation of the houses going up. There's not many people that will verify to make sure that they get somebody else in a first-time home buyer mortgage to buy their house. As they're going up to a bigger house, it's not I do have somebody sitting behind me who did that, but, so there's a lot of reasons why we need to do this.
Now, Ms. Calorio, I believe the Blueville Mill that we were looking into previously, having an environmental study done on, looking at the feasibility of using that
Yep.
for something along these lines?
Yeah, so Economic Development Commission had requested the use of Economic Development Trust funds in order to be able to do a Phase 1 environmental, which was completed. And that's actually being used in the marketing tools of that facility. And really the mills end up getting highlighted for this only because there is, while competitive, there is more incentive from the state to incentivize these programs and subsidize them, because redevelopments of mill properties are a heavy lift, and not every developer can do them, right? So the state does look to see that their developer has a good track record, but so we are trying to assist that property owner in engaging with a developer that would be able to redevelop that property. That is one of our, few mill buildings that's relatively intact and standing well. So the sooner we can get that one redeveloped, the better that one is. And in many use feasibility studies of properties like the Blueville Mill, typically housing is one of the highest use priorities of that facility. So it would likely look at a something for housing.
And that like with Blueville Mill, but then again, what kind of environmental concerns, like there's other things like the remediation of some of these mills, they could never allow residential housing because it's so contaminated.
Well, it's not necessarily that they could never allow it. So it's all about how much additional remediation would have to take place, right? So, and certain properties have, and it's very property specific. Each property is very specific depending on what the history was, right? So, in some of the properties, the original company is still responsible for some of the remediation, but typically they're only responsible to bring it up to the level of use in which the property was when they were using it, which a lot of times is industrial, right? And then it would be the next property owner, and if the new property owner doesn't want to use it for industrial, but wants to use it for something at a higher use threshold, like residential, it means that that property owner, the new property owner, has to do additional remediation to bring it up to the higher use. And that's where the heavier lift happens, right? That's where they have to activate a whole different capital stack in order to be able to do that additional remediation above just an industrial standards remediation. And, really, it depends on the property. Some, it makes sense financially to do the heavier lift and to bring it to residential. And a good example of that was Cargill Falls Mills in Putnam. They did the additional remediation and moved it into a residential facility with retail space, right? Sometimes it makes sense for that to happen. In other places, it makes sense for it to only come up to a commercial status because the lift is so great to try and get it all the way up to a residential, and they just can't make the economics work, right? And those economics are based on how many units can they actually get in the property, right? I mean, it all depends on how much units you can get into the space or how much commercial space you can get into the property, right? And it's all about the economics of that to determine what the capital stack is. So a property, mill properties can be reused and are very successfully reused for residential. It doesn't always, it means typically that there is added remediation that happens on those sites. And it depends on, chain of title as to who ends up owning the cost of that remediation.
I think Jill was mentioning it was like $100 a square foot, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you're talking about the heavy lifting. It's gonna be expensive to
expensive.
remediate a mill.
Yeah. It's 400.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was like, 100 a square foot was really low.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew it was-
It's $400 a square foot on a mill redevelopment. So it's a heavier lift, and most of the time you find developers that's their niche, and it's because they're used to working with the various capital stack sources that they have to go to, and with these, like Anne Marie was saying, the state isn't going to invest significant subsidy dollars in a renovation or a property lift like this unless they know the developer can get it all the way to the end and is successful in that. And they want to see proven track records on that because, they're using resources. So, and they're typically going after federal historic tax credits, and, it's a number of pieces that you have to pull together in order to make these work. And, it's not for the faint of heart to get through these, but there are certain developers, and they really look at the developers that come in and do these, they look at the number of units they can get in. That drives it.
100%.
It's the economics of it. If they can get to their sweet spot of, if it can get to a certain number of units to get into that development, then they've met their break point, right? And that's what it is. Jill does a great job at packaging and marketing those assets. And so the hope is that we can marry a developer to one of these sites and to help them navigate the available resources on the state side to be able to bring this in. We've had conversations with the state's Department of Economic Development Commissioner on the need for investment by the state in properties like this, specifically around developing additional affordable housing throughout our area. I think that, we've had some really good, productive conversations, and I think there's willingness there. So it's a matter of being able to bring this together.
And just, again, just for the record, the state will look at our affordable housing plan when they go through this. And they'll say, is this a place where they were considering affordable housing? So that's why we're putting the maps into our affordable housing plan. They want to say, how much work did the town do to this? How much, has the town done the background? Will it service the town? Yes, these will service the town because they're in the hot, as Jill was telling me, they're in the hot zone. That's where a lot of our businesses, our economic drivers are. So if we could get the housing there, then we would try to turn back and work with the employers in that area and say, okay, next step is getting the employees to the employment. You really to work with us on that? How are we going to do this? Are we going to do, Uber vouchers? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? Until people can get their car or do whatever. And that's something that will take the town, the employer, the developer, we all have to sit around the table and we all have to discuss this. But the state's going to look not only at the developers going in, they're going to look at the town, and they're going to say how willing and how well prepared is the town to do this.
Mary, if I may, I might be confused, wouldn't be the first time. There was the 10% minimum threshold. Wasn't there something about a mill rate penalty they were putting together if you don't meet them? Is that something totally different, or is that this affordable housing number?
So there
For
was
some
some
reason it's-
there were some proposals around that, but I don't know that actually went through. Yeah, so I'll have to go back through and look at the state legislation. I
was gonna
remember,
say, is that up this? I know it was last year.
but it didn't.
It didn't pass.
It didn't. I don't believe that passed through.
Can we find
that piece
out?
of it. I will.
I
I'll
don't
research
think
that.
it did, because I think that they wanted to make 10% for each town mandatory.
Yeah.
Right,
And
and-
they did not.
And they did not.
They
But
did.
is it on their table again on?
I have not heard that one coming up as a big driver this session.
Okay. I remember that was a big one last year.
Right, it
don't
was,
think-
and I don't believe that it's on this one for this year, but
I
I'll
don't
go
either.
back through. I did give you guys an update of all of the, in your packet, I think is the legislative
All right.
bill
Yes.
list of all the ones the CCM is tracking that it impacts municipalities. And I'm not recalling that one off the top of my head, but I'll go back and look tomorrow.
But that would be one to keep an eye on if it came back.
Correct.
That would affect this.
Correct.
Because we're so close to that minimum.
Because we are so
threshold.
close.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
except that
There are people a lot worse.
that have 0.02% or 0.2%, and so
So they wouldn't target us. like-
we
We
would not
hope.
be targets right away for certain.
Oh, okay.
Keep your fingers crossed.
But I will say, so one of the things that, Anne Marie had mentioned was, as our developers and as they're trying to go and compete for these grants, with the town having an affordable housing plan submitted to the state, it helps them. It helps them become more competitive for the programs versus a town that maybe, essentially blew off wanting to submit an affordable housing plan altogether, right? It shows that there is a community investment in this as well.
So it puts us a little ahead of the curve.
It
We're
does.
hoping, yes.
Okay. Thank
Well,
you.
and then the one thing, saying ahead of a curve, one thing that we are ahead of the curve in is being proactive in our land use regulations for naturally occurring affordable housing. We went through mill mixed-use development. That's been revised since it's been in. I think it's been revised twice since that's been put in. Our secondary dwelling unit, that was amended back in July of 2018. That made it, we simplified the process. Before it was a little convoluted on how you do it, and we're like, this just doesn't make sense. We're trying to help people, not cause people angst. And then our planned residential development, which has really started to take off. And again, that was revised, I believe, in 2017. But before that, under planned residential development, that's how we got 42 Maple Street. That was our first planned residential, no, that was mill mixed use. That was mill mixed use development. But our planned residential development, example of that one would be Country Living at Westcott, Westview.
Yeah, but aren't we're still a distressed community.
Yep.
No, nope. So we are no longer, we've been teetering with the distressed
Yeah.
municipality. So the past 2 years, we have gone off distressed municipality, back on, and we've come back off the list for distressed municipality. We can still utilize and receive the benefits of distressed municipality for 5 years after losing the designation of distressed municipality. But we keep teetering on and off, and it's really, a number of things go into that calculation. Average income, property value, average home sale, all of those components all go into that.
Unemployment rate.
Unemployment rates and all that. And
Jobs, yep.
so for unemployment, for example, Killingly, years ago, we were historically, 3 and 4 percentage points higher than the state unemployment rate. All for more than a decade. Recently, we have actually been below state unemployment rate. The state unemployment rate was right around 5, and we were just under that at, 4 and change. So we're seeing our unemployment rates decline substantially. Our median sale prices have been increasing on our properties, and our median income has been increasing. So all of those components start to shift us out of that distressed municipality. We still claim it for 5 years, but.
The other thing, looking at this map that was handed out, I'm looking to start in Dayville. Is that the Prim's Mill?
It is.
Proposed for residential?
It is, these
No.
are just to identify potential housing locations. And Prim, if somebody wanted to do the full, an additional remediation to bring it up to residential housing, it could. You could put housing there, but it would require, Prim obviously is required to get to a certain level of remediation industrial. But then another property owner, could, could do the investment to do additional remediation to bring it up to residential housing. It would be a substantial and heavy lift. There's no doubt about it.
But then transportation to employment, where, you know.
And that's where we have a conversation with a number of things, you know. So in our connectivity grant study and evaluation that we did, we had NECOG at the table and talking about Northeast Transit District, what potential services might be available there. There's alternative opportunities that the town may want to assist or even help coordinate with our with employers with regards to like a Uber voucher program or you know, different types of transportation opportunities.
And maybe that's a bone I have to pick with NECOG. We're trying to support transportation. You have to get to work. If it's snowing, no service. I don't agree with that. I can't, if I'm an employer, I need my people there, but if it's snowing out, and I know that we have a semi-public transportation system that says, we're not sending them out.
Yeah, and honestly, in our,
That's a problem.
yeah, and
That defies what we're trying to do here.
in our,
Kicking us in the teeth.
yeah, in our evaluation with Northeast Transit District, clearly our Northeast Transit District service is not necessarily geared towards job transportation, right? I mean, they start much later than most of our major employers, you know, begin their shifts. They have, you know, they don't, long gone are the, you know, first shift starts at, you know, 7 in the morning and ends at, you know, most of them have rolling starts to their shifts, which isn't easily accommodated by the transit district. And which is why really in the northeast corner, because one of the other components to this, unless we have more centralized hubs of housing where people would be getting on a certain location in order to get to a certain employer, it's very hard to accommodate that by a fixed transit bus system, right? If you're, you know, when you're sending out a bus and there's only one person that's getting on the bus, that's a really expensive taxi cab, right? Where maybe there's another way that you can accommodate that to bridge the gap where somebody may need some transportation assistance for a period of time in the beginning phase of their employment until they're eligible or able to purchase a car that they can then operate or whatever, you know. So to kind of get through those hurdles, but there's other things you kind of have to think outside the box when you're looking at a more rural setting for transportation rather than a traditional fixed route, you know, public bus system where there's not major density of population in one location going to one specific employer.
See, because it's interesting, we had this years ago, Rogers Corporation, there was housing right completely around the facility, Rogers ordered off the development. You look up at Blueville Mill, it's the, you know.
Every mill did it.
All of that is right there.
They had mill stores.
But the attitude, I don't know if the attitude of today's public wants to do that. That's the.
Well, I don't think any of the corporations are looking to get into real estate like that, you know, and.
More company stores?
Yeah, or company stores for that matter. I mean, you got to
Company
realize
dollars.
that most of the people when that, you know, the corporation, the company owned the house and you only lived in it while you were an employee. Most of us, you know, the average lifespan of an employee in an average employment setting is, you know, 7 to 10 years. Many people aren't looking to, you know, change their home every 7 to 10 years either, you know, and there's many that stay at a job location for even less than that, especially when they're in early starting careers. It may only be a 3-year gap, right? So I don't know that we're ever going to go back to that mode or methodology per se, but it is about being able to make sure that individuals can get from where they live to where they work in a reasonable way and in a timely way. And that's something that we identified with our employment stakeholders in the industrial park when we did that evaluation. And it just takes thinking outside the box rather than, you know, trying to just think of that bus that's going to run around and pick everybody up.
So getting back to the environmental restrictions, so environmental restrictions can sometimes be localized just to areas of concern on a particular site, and they can sometimes be as restrictive of no residential on the first floor of a property. So you do.
Why would that be?
Because they don't want like a slab on grade or potential being closer to that cap, having the degree of separation. So either having a commercial element in between or a common space in between. So I know there's a lot of talks of some of these mills. They come up a lot. There's a lot of environmental injustice with them. We want to see them cleaned up, try to see them addressed. They're definitely a blight on Killingly, as in most of New England. You see them. They're very expensive. When you're looking at the housing, because of the grant programs and setting us up with a document like this, it really does open us up to developers. And we start to have those conversations. We've already are having those conversations with developers about some properties. So it's nice to have the interest in Killingly, and I'd rather see us grow than our neighboring towns grow. So.
Are they expecting the town, what kind of investment are they expecting the town to make?
So we act as more as a intermediary in helping them navigate state or federal programs. So it's not necessarily the town investing dollars in this. It's we invest dollars in that we invest our staff's time and dedication in helping navigate state historic tax credits, and we may provide letters of reference or letters of support for the project, and just in supporting the developer through whatever process that they're trying to get through. It may be connecting them to the right resources at the state level, or connecting them to the right resources at the federal level.
So it's really a different subject we're talking about now, because
Yeah.
at a mill, $400 a square foot, that's nowhere near. I mean, you want to be for affordable housing, you want to be about 80,000 per unit. I would think somewhere in that area.
Yep, and so that's where all those subsidies have to come in play.
That's a lot of subsidies.
Right, and it's a lot of subsidy that has to happen for these, which is why they're such unique properties, and why you don't have every developer under the sun looking to do them, right? Because they're complex and they require a completely different capital approach to them in order to be able to get that economic to work out. And that's why the number of units is so critical in those, in order to be able to make the break even on it.
So you can do a little retail, a little mixed use, a little high end, a little low end.
Those are some of the more successful ones.
You have to
that do
move
have
it
that
around.
mix.
Commercial, industrial, that's what we want on our tax roll in the end. That's what's gonna carry our tax burden, so.
I'm thinking more along the lines of the affordable housing. That's where I was.
Right, but
Yep,
that's
but to have that balancing act
Yeah.
with them.
And that's why, there are developers out there, like she said, that has made it their, I don't want to say mission, but it's made them their career. And this is what they do, because they know how to do that mix. And one of the things the developers look for is the town ready and prepared for us? And this will prove that we're ready and prepared. So this is all the more reason why if we want to get those things done, this is the type of thing that we need to have in place. State looks for it, the developers look for it.
So you're looking at, so maybe you said we have some potential sites. Sort it out.
We can't tell you anything about it.
Yeah, I
'cause
mean,
it's
this
still
is
negotiated.
really just the really high view of the easy sites to say, here's mills that would be potentially able to be, right, So these are the, kind of those easy identifiers of these are locations that have infrastructure we know available to them, and would likely have sufficient space and opportunity for the number of units necessary for a break even on this, right? But they're challenging sites. But that's essentially what that map does. It doesn't say these are the only locations, right? It doesn't say that this is this is it and nowhere else, right? It's just saying that from, that 30,000-foot view, here are some easily identifiable potential options.
I guess we're waving the flag, say, we are here, and we're kind of, and after that, it's a whole different ballgame, but. no,
Anne Marie, what was the name of that book? Sorry not to interrupt.
The book that I bought is Missing Middle Housing.
Now,
Thank
when
you.
the
You're welcome.
Director of Economic Development, he came through a year ago, or whenever you were on a tour with him, he visited some of this.
The state of Connecticut, David Lehman came in.
That's different from the affordable housing people.
That was, so he was the he's the Commissioner of Economic Development at the state level. And so we did tour some of our major stakeholders at the industrial park, but we did also bring him through some of the housing, because as with businesses and business investment comes employees. And if you're gonna have, 500 new jobs land in your community, well, there means there's 500 more people that are going to be looking to get employed, whether they currently exist within the community. And when you have a very low unemployment rate, you may not have 500 available people to take those positions, which means you're looking to attract people in. Where do they live? And so this is it's that joint venture. These things have to come together, because to attract businesses, you have to also have housing for the employees as well. And, while some of the positions may very well fit within our existing housing stock, some may be that middle working class that it's going to be more challenging. How do we have that available housing stock for them as well? And so we did tour some of our available, potential opportunities for development.
Having grown up in Norwich, I do believe mill sites are a great place to put residential. I think of 3 huge projects they had. They had Thermos on Thames, where it was the old Thermos facility, manufacturing facility. That was one that got renovated to residential. The Falls Mills Apartments, that was another facility that was a mill that got renovated to residential. And then more recently, the Panema Mills in the Taft Hill section of Norwich. And just to see the turnaround of those areas, having grown up there and seeing the condition those mills were in, to see what it is now, I think if we can do anything to help support the possibility of converting some of these mills to residential, as Mary brought up, and that was something I was going to say, is if we're looking to continue to grow the town between industrial and commercial, we do need to have employees. People need to have places to live. And I think, and also the fact, if we can stay above the 10% where we're more in control of what goes on in our town, I think that would be a great thing as well.
You were talking about Norwich. Is there, I don't know how familiar you are with the people that are living there. Is there a turnover in these? I'm not just shocking, Doc.
I can only speak to 2 of the facilities because I've known people who have lived in them. I know someone who lived in Thermos on Thames for about 8 years. I know somebody who lived in the Fall Mills for, I believe it was about 10 to 12 years. The Panema Mill renovation is a more recent one. And actually, Jill can probably speak to this because Jill came from Norwich.
You're speaking my language when you talk about mill redevelopments in Norwich. I was on 2 of those projects, and there's currently a waiting list. The Thermos is independent condominiums, so the market dynamics were different at that time when the developers went in and they just renovated and then they sold the units. And they've withheld their resale value and have escalated because of the current housing stock. Panema Mills currently has pre-sold units for their phase 3, and they have a waiting list. And the tenants are everything from the basketball Sun players to retirees that don't want to do yard maintenance anymore. So they actually do revitalize communities and correct environmental injustices.
And if you want to look at, again, Westview, they were fully booked before they opened the doors. They had a waiting list the day when everybody moved in, they had a waiting list, and they still have a waiting list till today. So these places are in demand. You have.
Westview, is that affordable housing?
That's not affordable.
It's not affordable,
It's
but
not
it's a plan,
affordable.
but it's a planned residential, which is something that we put in underneath our program.
No, okay, I mean, that.
So it filled a void, it filled a need that this town had, that this town wasn't even necessarily aware of. And a lot of it was people who were, as they call them, elderly, were living in the family houses. And they were looking for some place to downsize to, and there was no place available. So when Westview came along, they were able to do it. That opened up our housing market for a whole nother section of people.
Any more questions, comments? Seeing none, we thank you all for this presentation. We'll now move on the agenda. On to item 7, unfinished business for town meeting action, and we have none. Next up will be item 8, citizen statements and petitions. Ms. Gloria, did we have any emailed?
We did not
comments?
receive any email public comments.
Okay. At this time, I will open up for citizen statements and petitions. If anyone would like to come speak, please step up to the podium and state your name and address.
My name is Earl McWilliams, 215 North Shore Road in Dayville. It's a question I don't think will be answered tonight, but just to put it on everybody's radar, wondering what the status of the negotiations are with Lake Street Generating. I know their contract is up, I think, June 30, and I'm just wondering, hopefully people are looking at that.
It's going to be for budget deliberations, budget comments. I'll have to.
Thank you.
I'll review it, but thank you for telling me on that.
Is there any further public comment?
No, it'll be for budget.
Last call for public comment. Seeing none, we'll move on the agenda. Next item up is 9, council and staff comments. Ms. Gloria, I don't know if you can say anything in regards to Mr. Earl McWilliams' question. I don't think we can talk much about that.
I apologize. I was talking to Liz on something, so I didn't hear his comment. What was?
Status of negotiations of the Lake Road generating contract.
We have nothing at this point.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is 10, appointments to boards and commissions. Matthew Wendorf is seeking reappointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission as a regular member. The term would run from January 2022 through December of 2024. Mr. Wendorf has been a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission as a regular member since February 2021. Previously was an alternate member since April 2017. His attendance has been steady over the course of his appointment. The Planning and Zoning Commission is a commission of 5 regular members and 3 alternate members. Currently, there are 5 active regular members, including Mr. Wendorf, and 1 active alternate member. There are 2 alternate member seat vacancies. Can I get a motion to reappoint Mr.
I'll make
Wendorf?
that motion to reappoint Mr. Wendorf.
Motion has been made by Mr. Catula, seconded by Ms. Barclay. Questions, comments?
I think he's doing a great job on there, so I'm glad to see him continue from being an alternate to move up to the permanent and to stay there.
Thank you. I agree. On behalf of the council, I always thank everyone who's volunteering their time for this community. I know Planning and Zoning is a very busy commission.
The Planning and Zoning is also a difficult commission because there's a lot of things to learn. And so he's been in that position, and I'm happy to see that he wants to continue because it's a continual learning process, especially as all of the zoning regulations keep changing.
Thank you. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on the agenda. Next item up is 11, reports from liaisons. We have a Board of Education liaison. Welcome, Mr. Farren.
Thank you. Well, where do I even start?
You got 2 hours till 11, so.
Those one-liners.
So, you know, most of our updates can be found on the local media. Let's start with the most recent development in that our chair resigned. I'm not going to get into the politics of that. She gave a statement to WINY, so if anybody's interested, they can read it on WINY's Facebook page. We do have on the agenda to elect a new chair tomorrow night. We also reviewing options for mental health in the schools on the agenda for tomorrow. Let's see what else. Oh, sorry about that. That's the only tone I can hear at work, because there's sometimes machines running next to me, so I can't, so I have that, but it's really embarrassing when you're not at work and it goes off. Let's see, just looking at the agenda for our meeting on March 23rd, just to hit a couple highlights. We had the Folk 2022 to 23 award presentation. Over $10,000 was given out, which was a record for that organization. We had a presentation on the Killingly Intermediate School, and just my takeaway from that, you know, was an excellent presentation. And we've made a lot of progress on the reading end as far as recovering from the setbacks that happened during COVID. Math, not as much, but there was some progress there. So all in all, reasonably good news as far as recovering as best as can be expected in such a short time frame from the setbacks of all the things that happened with COVID. Okay, the special meeting on March 16th for the school-based health center. There was a lot of support for the health center. Some members, myself included, had issues with it, as well as seeing some benefits to the program. All in all, the majority of members decided that the bad outweighed the good, and it was voted down by a 6-3 vote. We came up with a capital improvement plan for the school buildings, just a general guide, not any kind of strict plan, a general guide as to you know, issues that we'd like to see addressed over the next several years. We had an excellent presentation from Shipman and Goodwin, the board's legal counsel, on March 10th, and it covered FOIA and Robert's rules, things like that, obligations of boards of ed. It was a very, very informative presentation. It went over a span of 2 evenings, and that was very helpful, especially to the new members. I just, on that intermediate school presentation, I had a couple highlights listed here, but I don't think we need to go over that. I did cover that the major gains were in the reading end, and some recovery in the math. And I think that's all I have right now. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer them as best I can. Keep in mind that I fell asleep when I got home from work, and I'm still trying to wake up from that. So I'll do my best.
I'll open up any questions, comments.
I would just like to see the fiscal subcommittees get together again and not wait until the next budget cycle starts. So we need to go over, to set up a meeting as soon as we can, or, you know, as soon as this budget cycle is ready. So, you know, May or June.
Okay.
With all the staff shortages that, you know, when the budget presentation was given and stuff, are there any, like, I guess, in the bullpen staff being interviewed? Are any of those positions being looked at right now? Do they have anyone coming on board? Or are we just like, we don't have anybody right now to fill any of those spots? They said, what, 20?
That sounds right. That would be a question for the superintendent. I know they're constantly trying to acquire new staff and fill those positions, so it's a never-ending thing. I don't know what the exact status is at any given moment. He'd have to answer that question.
To add on to what Ms. Barclay said, I was glad to see a little bit more information in the superintendent's budget presentation that he did to the council. And like she said, I'd like to see the fiscal subcommittees of both the town council and the Board of Ed have an opportunity to sit down a little bit sooner to see how we can work towards a budget that's presented where taxpayers can look at it and understand it a little bit better.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an excellent goal. And you know, it can be pretty daunting looking at the budget. I mean, we go over it for several months, and you know, it's without. I'd like to see more like a comparison between, you know, prior years to where we're at to get a better idea of where each individual budget item is, because a lot of times you don't get a good feel for that just going over the budget as presented. So I think we should work on something like that, definitely.
I know the way the town manager presents the town governmental budget, she always includes previous years, and then also looking at the current year, what was budgeted and what's projected. I know seeing that for myself, it definitely helps to look at trends.
Right. Well, they do that. They do show, you know, previous years, you know, the increase from basically the last budget as a percentage. But some of those numbers are crazy. You know, some of those numbers can be hundreds of percentage points higher. But it's usually, fortunately, a very small dollar item per se. And there's usually a good reason for that, in that, you know, there was a need for a new item that wasn't found in the previous year. So you know, it is pretty it's pretty clear as to where the budget went from the year before, but it's not always obvious why it got to where it is.
Yeah.
There's
Thank you.
other school districts, if you pull up their budgets online, it will give you the student to staff ratio. It'll also give you if they have guidance counselor, there's one guidance counselor per 300 students. We have none of that. Our student population has actually gone down, but the staffing for administration has gone up, also for the counselors. So none of that information is transparent at all.
Right, and I agree with that. And you know, when we see enrollment, you know, it hasn't gone down a lot in the past several years, but it has gone down slightly, and yet there's constantly a call for more staff. And I think we have to look at that carefully. I mean, is that really necessary? I mean, you can see if your enrollment is rising, but do you really need more staff if your enrollment is steady or dropping? You know, I think a lot of our problem right now is we have unfilled position. You know, we've already identified staff that we need. Those positions have gone empty. So, you know, rather than trying to add positions on top of the positions we haven't filled, I think we need to look at that first, even if it requires, you know, a pay rate raise for those particular positions. I think we have to at least look at that.
Mr. Wayhead.
Couple of questions. It's been brought up by a few people that your budget, there's a lot of items, there's a few items that just say other and give a dollar amount. I know when Mary puts the budget together, it's always defined of where that money's going. So I would like to see that being different. And being the transparency, I know Miss Jolly and Miss Abram had a big concern about checks being written and there's no transparency. Has that been worked on, or has that been resolved?
Yeah, I mean, several of us, myself included, had some questions, not as far as not questioning the validity of the checks, but just, you know, it's just listed as it was paid to an individual or a company or whatever, and we're not familiar with exactly who those people are, who those companies are in some cases. So, you know, we've started like listing check numbers just to get an idea of what those checks involve, what it's for, and they have been providing that information. So, but we're looking at getting it so that individuals don't have to say, hey, what is this? You know, just have it like a brief description of what the item is right there in the monthly reports. So there's no question as to what it is, and anybody can look at it and go, well, that makes sense. You know, if it's software, educational software, or it's some service that was provided, or whatever it is, or reimbursement to an individual for something that they paid for out of pocket. You know, that I think it's a much better way to go than the way it is right now. It's just way too basic as far as what the checks were. So we're working on getting that description put into those reports.
So it's basically on its way to being resolved?
Yes, absolutely.
Norm, what about stipends? How are those broken down? Do we see those in the budget or no? Or do you guys get a monthly report of like who of staff are paid certain stipends for different things? I think that needs to be more transparent.
That is a good question, and I believe they are in there. There were decision packages that were put forth for this budget that included adding substantially to those numbers, and almost all of them were rejected, except for a girls' golf coach. But that was the only thing we added, just in the interest of fairness, you know, because there were several girls that were interested in playing golf, and the two programs aren't compatible. So we did add that stipend, but that was it.
Thank you.
So I know there was a stipend for, what was it, for exchange students. I'd like to know if that stipend is still being paid out, because I know there haven't been any foreign exchange students, or do you have a record of that?
I believe it was for a counselor for foreign exchange students.
Yeah, but we
Was
don't
the
have foreign
exact,
exchange
yeah.
students.
That issue has come up, and I will definitely put that. I'm going to write that one down, because somebody else raised that issue, and yeah, we need to. I don't know if that's still being paid, so yeah.
So, going off of Ula's point, Norm, we wanted to see, and I've heard other people wanted to see, student-to-teacher ratio. And I also heard something like Susan Lanning commented at the group meeting, that she had heard that students were going to study hall at times because they weren't teachers. So what I was thinking is if we could get, so what we ended up getting was a yearly teacher-to-student average, which really doesn't tell you much. What you really need is you can get a monthly summary, would tell you a little bit more, or a daily per month per class. Like, it depends if the variables, how they store their variables. If the variables are already stored in there, they just go blum blum and they pull a report and it's easy. And if there's a bunch of students in study hall, you're going to see it. If there's a small ratio, 1 to 5, you're going to see it. It's going to be very obvious. If the variables aren't created yet, then that will take a little work. But it just, does that make sense? Like how their Excel or whatever type of spreadsheet they have. It would be very obvious if we could have that type of either a monthly summary or a daily per month per class. Depends how they enter their data now.
Yeah, I don't.
Can I clarify?
Yes, please.
So basically, what the determining factor of, like, this staff is being paid for this staff, and it's all justified, I guess would be the word, is it would be a time study on a teacher-student ratio. And I don't know if Killingly has done a time study on their staff in I don't know how many years, but that would be specifically what you would do for that. I don't know what would go into that, but that would go a long way to prove that your amount of staff matches your students and what their needs are specifically. And then it would be broken down by certified and non-certified as well.
Because the superintendent said the enrollment has gone up, but we never get any real numbers.
Well, we're provided with that, and we're also provided with the staff-to-student ratio numbers. It's by grade level, and I don't know if it gets down to exactly what the class is, but it's grade level, and it'll list, like, say five classes and what the teacher-to-student ratio is, and just going by memory, and I could be way off, but I think roughly you're looking at like probably 20 students per teacher, and then on top of that you're going to have some non-certified helpers in some of the classes. I think we have to be careful with some of the bookkeeping requirements. We don't want to get to the point where we're so overburdening staff that we're having to hire an additional person to fill out these reports. I don't know how labor intensive something like that would be. It seems like it would be a doable thing without a whole lot of effort, especially if it was software driven.
That's why I was saying it depends how they have their variables stored. If there's a variable for every class already, they should be able to just push a button and you can make that report with Wizard or something in 5 minutes. If
I don't know what they have.
Yeah.
So
well,
I
that's what I
have
was
to
saying
talk to the
Norm.
staff.
It's something to find out, and if not, then it's more intensive and, a long-term project, or something.
But they do report the staff to student ratios. We get those reports, and they're public records. So if the town council wanted to look at that stuff, I'm sure they could print extra copies or have it online, and maybe they already are online for you to look at at your leisure. yeah, when you've got nothing else to do.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Mr. Farren.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on in the agenda, 11B, Borough Council Liaison.
That would be me.
I was gonna say, Lynn did let me know that she wasn't gonna be able to join for this month because she's still recovering. But she should be back next month.
But don't have no fear. I sit on that council too. So in March, the regular meeting is always the third
Wednesday, I think it is. Well, I'm gonna probably have to be gone by then because I have to go to work in about 30 minutes, so. They're still, managing the sidewalk litigation from the fall years and years ago is still pending. They have approximately $30,000 for facade improvements in the borough area. May 11th will be they have a meeting at 6:30 at the fire station for their ARPA funding. So if you're anybody that's watching that's in the borough that would like to have an idea where the borough's ARPA funds will be spent, that's when you want to come. The fire department had a trailer that that they weren't using anymore, that they were looking for offers. They finally received an offer on it, and the money from that sale went into the truck reserve, because I believe they're looking to replace a truck. Their audit went well. There were no weaknesses. It was a clean audit. Their pension they received a report from the CPA and the auditors that their pension's 62% financed, which doesn't sound as nice as the town's, but apparently that's really, really good, because I guess the state's only somewhere around 50%, so they're still doing well. They re-elected the burn official for the borough. It's going to continue to be Scott Shatney. There was some repairs to the south side of the fire department that they needed to work on, but they were going to wait for the weather to finally break. And of course now it's just raining and raining and raining, so now they really have to wait. They actually had their budget meeting, and approval was yesterday on Monday the 11th. They reported that their water fees for this next year are actually going to be down 42% because of the Pura readjusted the water fees. So it was really exorbitant. They were paying they were paying a lot more than anybody else was paying.
Too bad they can't get reimbursed.
That would have been great. The fire department's operating budget for the next year is going to be about $129,000. That's up about $6,600. They have 27 active members, and they do a lot of coordinating with South Killingly, and they do a lot of their trainings together because they both kind of cover each other. The burn official reported that there were 10 incidents over the last year, that he basically used education on these are the borough's burning requirements, and that seemed to make the difference for him. There were a lot of questions that were brought up and answered about the upcoming budget. Nothing really. It was just more people. It was really kind of nice because it's probably the most people I've seen at a borough meeting ever. But so it looks like people are becoming more and more interested in what's going on. So that's always good. And we all are going to be getting a raise in the next year. The borough councilors will go from $75 for the year to $150 for the year, and the borough president's going to be moving up to $1,800 for the year. But other than that, the budget was passed, no problems, and like I said, the next extra meeting will be the May 11th one for the ARPA funds, and then our regular meeting will be like a week later for the third Wednesday in May, then in June, and then we take July and August off, and we go back in September. So, but that's the borough.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments from council? Seeing none, we'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is 12, discussion and acceptance of monthly budget reports. Can I get a 12A? Can I get a motion to accept the summary report on general fund appropriations for town government?
I'll second it.
Motion has been made by Mr. Grandelsky, seconded by Mr. Ctula. Questions, comments? Ms. Murphy, we are currently on the summary report on general fund appropriations for town government, and we have a motion and a second to adopt it, and we're in discussion right now. Mr. Wood, do you have anything you would like to add?
Nope.
Thank you. Making sure you're awake. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on. 12B, can I get a motion to adopt the system object based on adjusted budget for the Board of Education?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula, seconded by Ms. George. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on in the agenda to 13A, Town Manager's Report. Ms. Calorio, if you could go over this.
Sure. So the first part is just kind of the relaying of the information with regards to stats for COVID. As you can see, those numbers continue to decline as anticipated for this time of the year. I gave an update with regards to the Killingley Memorial School project. So the first part is the town is requesting special legislation to be considered by our legislation. The project, the state has what they call a space standard. And it is a calculation derived by the number of students, and what they have determined is an allocated square footage per student, and it calculates how big a facility should be. The existing building with the portable classrooms exceed that space standard by 5,000 square feet, right? The proposed renovation, which includes the replacement of those portable classrooms with a new wing, ends up exceeding the total existing space standards by about 8,500 square feet, right? The legislation that's currently on the books right now with the state exempts buildings that were constructed prior to 1950. So here enters KMS in the quagmire. So KMS was, and that legislation is in the books because they recognize that buildings that were built before 1950 have inherent inefficiencies in the designs of those buildings that will never allow those buildings to meet the space standards. They will be oversized because of the way those buildings were designed. And here enters KMS. KMS was designed in the late 1940s. The shovel hit the ground in 1951. So while we were constructed after 1950, we were designed in the 1940s, right? And so that building has the same inefficiencies that we believe that legislation is intended to exempt. With the transition that's happened at DAS with the Office of School Construction and the new interim acting director, they are doing a strict read of the legislation, right? So they are doing a strict read and saying it was constructed in 1951 and therefore it doesn't qualify for this previous exemption, right? So we have two avenues and we are exploring both avenues, but the first one, the most simplistic one, is to request our legislators to put in a one-liner in the legislation that exempts this project from the space standard portions of the grant, right? And it really meets the intention of the original legislation of those that were constructed prior to 1950. So we've made that request to our legislators. I know that our legislators are working on that. I've had conversations with most of our legislators on this, and some text message back and forth with one of our other ones. And so we are hoping that they'll be able to get that legislation in. It's not an uncommon legislative request on an annual basis. Lots of projects across the state that run into these quagmires, if you will, of, not quite fitting in. It's very common, especially in office of school construction, for this type of legislation to get put in place. So we're hopeful that our delegates will proceed and get that put through. At the same time, we are still working with office of school construction on other avenues of really re-looking at the existing building. For example, one of the inefficiencies is the hallways in the building are more than 8 feet wide. The current construction standards for a school, hallways are only 8 feet wide. Ours are wider than that. When you calculate out the additional square footage in just the extended width of the hallways, that's almost 2,000 square feet. So of our 8,500 square foot overage, 2,000 of it is attributed just to extra space in hallways. There's nothing we can do about that in the existing building. I mean, those hallways are what they are. You're not going to reconfigure them into something else. So we're taking additional steps with the Office of School Construction to recognize those inefficiencies and to exempt that square footage that's attributable to those inefficiencies. But we are pursuing that special legislation through the state to try and move that forward. As far as the project is concerned, we are in full swing with the design team. We're in the process of pulling together what's considered an early package, an early phase package for release, which will, in order to be able to keep this project on schedule and likewise also within budget, we are looking at doing an early phase demolition. It'll demolish the 2003 portable classrooms and do the initial site work for that foundation for the new addition. It'll also do abatement in the main building and the main initial structure. One of the things that the design team has had to do a lot of consideration around is at the same time that we're going to be doing the construction of the new wing, we also need to do a renovation on the interior of the existing building, right? We have to do that simultaneously, which means we have to create swing space. So initially there was we were looking at utilizing the gymnasium to create that swing space. It would have required the construction of 8 classrooms. And when you think of swing space, temporary classrooms, and you think, all right, they're going to put them in the gymnasium, right? When you get through the requirements of what that actually looks like, in reality, they have to physically construct full classrooms, ceilings, HVAC, walls, floors, everything in the gymnasium in order to be able to use them as temporary classroom space for swing space, right? So there's a huge cost factor involved in that, right? So what's options around that? And so that's where this team has really started to explore utilizing. So the current design now is to activate Westfield Avenue to place the 4th grade in Westfield Avenue in that rear hallway, in that rear corridor space for essentially all of next school year and half of the following school year. Well, part of the following, not quite half of the next school year. So it would be from September to December of the following school year. That will alleviate the need to construct those full classroom spaces in the gymnasium. Another benefit to that is, the project didn't contemplate or have in it that we were going to be redoing the gymnasium floor because the gymnasium floor was recently redone. So we weren't looking at redoing that. If we had constructed classrooms in there, we would have now had to redo a gymnasium floor that had just been recently redone, like within the last six or 7 years. So we wanted to not have to duplicate efforts on that. So So we're looking at, they're going to be putting the fourth grade classroom down into the Westfield Avenue. So what's the snowball effect of that? So Westfield Avenue is used during the summer months by Camp Wallaby, right? And it's been used by Camp Wallaby for the past several years. We don't know definitively that we're not going to be able to use it for Camp Wallaby, right? We're still in that evaluation phase of what spaces, because they need to prepare some of those spaces for administrative staff, nursing staff, all of the support staff for fourth grade that have to be there while fourth grade is in that location. And so what space is going to be available? So we're working this month through what does that activated space need to look like? When do they need to have access to that space in order to activate it over the course of the summer to determine what available space might be available for Camp Wallaby, but also KMS, the school has a before and after school program that runs a summer camp type program through the summer. They typically operate out of KMS. KMS is completely out of commission for everything over the summer. That whole building is going to be activated into renovation status over the course of the summer. This Board of Education has actually approved opening school 2 weeks later for next school year in order to accommodate the renovation, the activation of that early phase renovation, right? So where does that program go? So we're brainstorming around this. We're trying to think outside of the box. Though both of those day camp programs are critical to our community. We all recognize that, so we need to come up with what solutions are around that. So I just wanted you to be aware that some of those components may be moved around as we try and activate both of these components. As far as utilizing Westfield Avenue for that fourth grade swing space, we've timed that out with the Westfield Avenue project and where we will be on design and actual construction on that project as well. And we believe that the contemplated use of Westfield Avenue for the fourth grade classrooms for that duration of time will fit within the constraints of what we're looking at and the activation of getting the Westfield Avenue space renovated for the community center. So we're juggling really all of those projects at the same time. But that's kind of where KMS is. I appreciate, I know Chairman Anderson and Kevin were reaching out to some of our legislators, advocating as well for that special legislation. I appreciate that. If any of you, I think Ed was also helpful with that. If any of you also would have an opportunity, I can send you the information, and I know that this is your first opportunity in hearing this, but I can send you the information, and if you want to also reach out to our legislators, making that ask and supporting that request for the special legislation, I think that would be helpful collectively as the group moving forward. But we are hopeful that special legislation would be considered by our delegates.
Is there a time frame that the state people have to decide on this? What is their schedule?
For which? For the state special legislation?
The state,
Office of School Construction.
Office of School Construction, yeah. What is their time frame?
So the Office of School Construction, so actually, the special legislation is before the Office of School Construction, right? So Office of School Construction, we really need to have a determination by Office of School Construction before we proceed with the early phase, the bid packages, right? So we really need to have a determination by, end of May-ish, end of May timeframe. That's not to say that the Office of School Construction couldn't make a later determination and apply it to the entire, apply it to the project as a whole. They have that flexibility of doing that. Clearly, the special legislation has to be introduced by May 2nd. And
That's the legislative session.
Right, the legislative session ends on the 4th of May, right? So it's a short session. So that's the, the most simplistic way of doing this. But I think that we've had some really good conversations with Office of School Construction. So I think that they're understanding the inefficiencies and understanding that, this was really designed in the 1940s, which is the, kind of the grounds and the cuspis of the legislation you passed. You passed legislation that exempts these buildings because of the inefficiencies of the design. And when you have a building that was designed in the 40s, just because the shovel hit the ground in 1951, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have those same inefficiencies, right? So we've had some great conversations with Office of School Construction, but again, we're still hoping that special legislation by the state, by our delegates, will get put in. It makes it the cleanest way of, and the most concrete, if you will.
Mary, would it be helpful for, we can send in a request too, but would it be helpful to share that with our constituents and see if they could
Sure,
reach
absolutely.
out to them too?
Absolutely.
Would it be possible to put something on a town website, just something small saying, please reach out to your state legislatures, and links to the
Sure.
state website where it has the information as far as phone numbers for the office and emails?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. We can get that put on.
I do have a couple questions. The existing statutory guidelines, as far as 1950, is it before, has to be constructed prior to 1950?
It says
or,
constructed prior to 1950.
Okay.
And that's where they're saying the shovel hit the ground in 1951.
And my understanding is it was like January 3rd of 1951.
It was. Right. Right. It was like January 1951.
Which is still,
So
it's still a year past.
It's more than a year past. And so, and my understanding is the intent around that was to recognize those buildings that were constructed, but, the design happened prior to 1950. So.
Now, if, I always got to play devil's advocate. If we don't get the reimbursement that we had been indicated by Office of School Construction, by the previous director, Costas, that we were going to get 72% by going with the renovate as new. Where would that leave us? I believe you had mentioned a 60% figure reimbursement.
Well, it depends. The design team would then have to look at what level the school Office of School Construction would exempt. So they may exempt like the 2,000 square feet of the hallways and, other pieces that we might be able to whittle down. And then we may have to reduce the size of the addition in order to maintain the 72%, in order to maintain it within the space standards, right? So that means that we have to, reduce overall size of what the building is that we're designing. So that's an option to be considered. But ultimately, if we decide hard and fast that it has to be this exact number, and we can't get any additional exempted, then the original, so the expanded amount that makes it renovate as new, the caveat that the council put on was that we needed to have at least 69% reimbursement rate. So then we would have to potentially come back to the council to get authorization to receive the project at the 62%, right? The entire amount was authorized, so the entire project cost was authorized. So there's options. It doesn't necessarily stop the project. We would have decisions to make around programmatically what makes sense for the student body, and so that would be initially a conversation around with the design team, and obviously that incorporates the school and the school staff and their programs to determine what and how this gets balanced.
Now, when the council did approve this project at the redesigned amount, the renovate is new, at that point, we couldn't put it out to public referendum due to
Correct.
the governor's executive orders.
Correct.
If we end up going forward with the project with the square footage that we're at right now, and we don't receive that 72% reimbursement, and it falls below the 69% threshold, would the council then have the opportunity to put that back out on a referendum to public, for the public to vote on if they want to?
It would be the council's purview.
Okay. All right.
I will say, based on the conversations that we've had with Office of School Construction, that I think that we are going to be potentially able to get a good bulk of it exempted. And so if we have to make modifications, it may not be hugely impactful to the program. So I don't know that we would have to come back to the
Okay.
council at this point in time. But ideally, we would really like to see that special legislation, because that,
Yeah, that would make this
definitely
so much
makes
easier.
makes it completely
Yes.
clear.
Yep.
And there's while it's unique for Killingly, we haven't necessarily had to ask for special legislation. This ask is not an abnormal ask for legislators. When I was talking to our bond counsel, she's like, there is a list of probably 25 or 30 municipalities that are asking for this, a very similar ask. And it's a very standard thing that happens nearly every legislative cycle for this type of special legislation. And some of it is, somebody's public hearing timing got posted wrong or something. This is not an abnormal or really challenging ask to have out there. So we're really hopeful that our delegates will be able to be successful in getting this put in.
I would like to add, it is good that this came up now and not 3/4 of the way through construction, because Office of School Construction did reach out to a couple towns, a couple municipalities, and pulled back grant funding when they were already well into the construction phase. So we weren't the only town that Office of School Construction reached out to. It isn't like they're singling out Killingly by any means. They looked over everything. Yep.
No, but maybe my question was with the school construction, timeframe wise, to get massive use of summer school shutdown type of thing. Like, school ends in June.
Correct.
How is that, but if school construction delays their decision and we start getting into, July.
Just because they delay their decision on that doesn't necessarily, they're going to delay the decision on the ability for the town to move forward on phase one. The phase one piece isn't necessarily going to be, we can change still the design at that point in time. We're not locked into design. We're demolishing and we're abating.
Okay. No,
Right? So you're demolishing and abating. You're not constructing.
When the kids are out of the school, to
Yeah.
get the most bang
Right.
for our buck.
So to be clear, when the students go back into school the following year, it's we have to abate ceiling areas, some of the floor tiles. There's a lot of things that have to. So it's going to be completely safe. Everything will be tied up, secured, all of that. But it is going to look more industrial. Right? It's going to look a little bit more industrial than what they're seeing right now. They will have no interaction or any access to any actively renovating spaces, right? All of those will be secured off. But in order for us to get the abatement done, we have to do it when the building's empty.
Yes,
right?
that's right.
And they have to go through and abate those tunnels. So there's a lot of abatement that needs to occur throughout the building. And so they are going to need to, so just because we pull the trigger on that early phase, we still have flexibility around the actual design size-wise of the new wing, of the addition part, right? That can still get adjusted. We won't be at final design phase of that piece yet at all, right? So we'll still be working through that phase. Some of the other early phase construction stuff that they're going to do is there's some minor utility components that cross under where the new wing is going to be. We need to shift those respectively out of the way, so that way that foundation area is clear. So we still have time to
We get a lot of
move
work
around.
done,
We can
that's
get,
the thing, we can get a lot of the major,
We can.
the dirty, I guess the dirty work done.
Yep.
So, okay, that's my concern, that, some delays.
Yep.
The other things can be worked out, but,
Yep.
the asbestos and all that stuff, I
Mhm.
want an empty building, I do know.
Yep, and that's why they, there's, that summer goes quick, which is why, it was very fortunate that we were, it was very helpful for the Board of Education to be willing to delay school opening for the additional 2 weeks. That can really make a big difference. Right, that can make a big difference in availability.
Maybe one of the things, what is can they start prior to July 1st, or there has to be, July 1st is the?
No, they would,
School gets out like.
as soon as school gets out, we get in.
Okay, that's.
As soon as school goes out, we go in.
5 days, 5 or 6 days, again, on the beginning.
You take every day you can get
Right.
when it comes to this type of renovation.
Sometimes that July 1st number is a.
No,
you can't-
no, that doesn't count for this. That's not for this. So another thing, just wanted to update you, back in 2019, the town had approved the sale of 125 Alexander Parkway. During the due diligence phase, the buyer learned of some existing brownfields on the site, and so decided not to proceed and with that sale. So we are doing a formal release of that, and we'll be refunding the $1,000. The town was aware of the brownfield situation in advance, and so that will formally terminate, but really the contract terminated anyway based on time alone. So it's just notifying you of the formal termination of that. The town, you probably saw in some of the media, the town was awarded from the Communities Challenge Grant. So we had put in 2 applications on this. One was our Brickyard building, our Brickyard project, which Jill has been working on, and she presented to you when you guys met with the Economic Development Commission. It's a really great project. The other application that we put in, I had put in for, was on the community center, to receive reimbursement on the community center. I didn't get the reimbursement on the community center. They funded the Brickyard project. So it's still a great asset and a renovation of activating some really underutilized space within our town. So really excited to see that project start to move forward. So we'll be going through design. We're going to start really working with all of the, collectively, our staff team comes together to start really working through all the components of it, including, we've been talking about the storm drainage that kind of gets through that area and stuff like that. So we need to kind of talk through all those components and what the impacts of this would potentially be on that, and get through the design phase of that. So that'll take some time. Lastly, I gave you the updates, so CCM, and I gave you the link for where you can get these updates. So this is a live document. These are all the bills that CCM is tracking right now in both the Senate and the House on things that are impactful specifically to municipalities. There are hundreds of other bills out there, but they try and cull through and give us exactly, and this is kind of the snapshot, and it lets you know which ones they're opposing and supporting and the whys behind it, right? So that just kind of gives you that snapshot. You can go on that link, and as the bills update, they update this list, right? So as things either don't get passed, never get taken up, don't get called, all of that, they update this list, so you have a constant update throughout these next coming days. I did email to many of you some call to actions on a couple of the bills, and one of them was on exempting nonprofit properties, and they were talking about putting, the proposal is to exempt them, but the state would make the towns whole by adding it to our payment in lieu of taxes payment that they have underfunded for the last 20 years, because we only get 20% of the actual value of the tax revenue that we would otherwise get for those properties. So clearly, that really shouldn't be a consideration. That would be a loss all the way around for the town. So I appreciate all of you that have had an opportunity to reach out to our legislative delegates on any of those items as well, because those can be substantially impactful. And, in my conversations, one of the ones that I've been tracking pretty closely is the motor vehicle proposals. They've had a proposal, there's actually 2 proposals out there, and most legislators are focusing on the motor vehicle mill rate cap, right? So there's a legislative proposal out there to cap the mill rate for motor vehicles. Wouldn't actually impact Killingly because they're talking about capping it at, I think, 30 mils or 29 mils or something like that. And the proposal is that, again, the state would make the municipals whole for the difference between, what the cap is and what the municipal's mill rate is. So that one's fraught with problems because clearly the state never holds up their end of the bargain, right? So it could maybe at some point in time, impact Killingly, but wouldn't be right away. And again, probably the revenue would never stay there. The other one that's by far more impactful is the proposal to completely change the methodology and valuation for motor vehicles. So they want to, right now, motor vehicles are valued based on fair market value annually, and it goes off of a registry, not the Kelly Blue Book, but the NADA.
It's NADA.
Yeah.
Which I have issues with the way they use that.
But that's how it's currently done because it's recognizing fair market value, right? So the proposal by the governor is to change it to a 20-year depreciation schedule. And so the motor vehicle would depreciate over 20 years and remain at a 10% value of the original cost of the vehicle 20 years later. That will dramatically reduce our grand list value for motor vehicles. And while the average person has not necessarily experienced until recently inflation in the cost of their, appreciation in the value of their vehicle, those that have antique vehicles or sports cars or certain heavy equipment, those can appreciate in value, and we would lose that valuation completely, right? The proposal on that also shifts all commercial vehicles off of the motor vehicle grand list and onto personal property. So the commercial owners, the commercial business owners would be required to report that motor vehicle now on their personal property tax declaration form. The conversation from the governor's office is that this will allow the towns to value or receive the greater value of additional equipment that's placed on these vehicles. The bigger problem is that we struggle with people filing their personal property taxes. And if it's not coming through the motor vehicle list, we're not necessarily going to even know they have the commercial vehicle anymore, right? And so now we have to go and peek in garages to try and find motor vehicles that are supposed to be on a personal property tax declaration form. Forget about the equipment that's added value added to the vehicle, right? So that's wrought with problems and will likely cost the towns a lot more money in doing personal property tax declaration audits to make sure that people are declaring the proper value of all of this equipment, right? So I've been advocating very loudly with any of our legislators as well as because most of the legislators are only looking at, it's this one on the property tax, the mill rate cap. That's one piece. The bigger problem is the other one that is going to literally gut our motor vehicle grand lists, and it's going to shift that shift is going to move from motor vehicle, and it's going to shift it all to residential and business. That's where it goes. There's nowhere else for the town to go with it. So it's going to shift it all to residential and business cost, and you're going to see the the bigger wins on this are gonna be the individuals that are potentially renting, and they have one motor vehicle, and they're not paying that property tax bill. It might eventually catch up to them in a rent cost. However, they're not paying the same cost, and so that's a really big impact. And there's been no studies, there's been no evaluation as to the actual impact to the municipalities on this. No studies whatsoever. They don't have any figures on this whatsoever. So that's a greater one that we're, CCM is loudly in opposition of it. Cost, the collaboration of small towns and cities, they're also in opposition for it. Many of my peers have been having a lot of conversations with our legislators in opposition to this, trying to make them aware of the severe unfunded mandate that would pass through, and the huge burden that would shift to residential and business commercial.
I just want to real quickly expound on my issues with using NADA. The reason why I have issues with using NADA to value privately owned vehicles is the NADA is the National Auto Dealers Association valuation on vehicles values that are at a dealership. When a vehicle's at a dealership, it carries a warranty. Anyone who has a used car, they don't have a warranty on their car, so the value of the car is less. So NADA, and right in NADA's listings, it says that that's the value for a retail price for a car at a dealership. Right. So to use NADA on private party value is just throwing the number way out.
Is there other ways of valuing?
Kelly Blue Book actually
I agree.
has private party value.
Right. There are other ways of evaluating, and is there other ways to do that? Yes. But moving it to a strictly depreciation only method
that
is it doesn't reflect, it's like taking your house and saying that it's only going to depreciate in value, right? And so all of our houses should also only be valued on a depreciating schedule based on when you originally bought the house. It's not the way the fair market works, and it doesn't equitably distribute what that burden actually is.
Yeah, because even when you total your car, the insurance company comes and looks at how many miles are in it. They look at how many times you've changed the oil. Has the transmission fluid been changed?
Right. They look at the overall value of the vehicle.
Yes.
Right. And so, and that comes to the basic premise of assessment. You're assessing based on fair market value. However you determine fair market value, but you're assessing on fair market value. When you completely take a third of your list and switch it over to a depreciation only method, the other side has to pick up where that drop is, and it's an unfair shift and an unfair burden. So, just my platform of getting it out there.
The people that would help out are the people that have 5 vehicles.
Especially if they have 5 sports cars.
Very true.
I have a question back to the school project. Did we anticipate moving the 4th grade around? Because it sounded like we were excited, but we weren't,
So that's always been part of the conversation. As from the very get-go, swing space has always been one of the items that we knew needed to be fully fleshed out. Initially, we thought that we were going to be able to maintain them within the building because we really thought we were going to be able to do just work, basically do the addition and then work on the main building. Based on escalation of costs and timing, we're going to need to activate space into renovation status in the main building, which is really what's driving a shift in this. We've always expressed that there's the possibility of Westfield being an option, but there was a request at one point in time to shift the entire school over to Westfield Avenue for the duration of the renovation. That's really not physically possible. There's not enough space over there to accommodate the entire student body of KMS into the Westfield Avenue. But you could accommodate an entire grade level, right? It's still a strain on the staff and a strain on the overall programming because you have to kind of split your administration components between the two. So we were trying to avoid that, just so that way you don't have to, you still have to get a nurse in both buildings now, right? You have to have, the upper administrators kind of covering both buildings at the same time to try and alleviate that pressure. But we've always had it as a possibility. While we were trying to keep it contained into the main building, that's just the direction that we've had to move.
Does that affect the budget of the overall project? I would imagine the increased cost is gonna.
Well, it actually helps alleviate some of the pressure on the budget because we're not having to do that full construction of actual classroom space in the gymnasium. So you're not buying all of that material to construct.
So you anticipated that gymnasium?
We did.
Okay.
We
That's
did. We
kinda
absolutely
what I was
did.
getting at. Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Because you sounded excited that we didn't have to do it, which completely makes sense.
Yes.
Absolutely. You have a building down here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I do know that there's one thing Mr. Grandelski had brought up was the possibility of using Westfield when we were talking about this whole project, as well as a few other people had brought it up, just to try and alleviate the amount of shuffling around of students and having to expose them to some of the construction work. But I'm glad to see that we're able to do that now, and that's a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's close by, but to redo the gym floor, that, I kind of missed that part. I didn't realize we were going in there. That would not have been I don't think I want to put classrooms. You destroy the floor almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would.
At least the option is there. But then, if we weren't renovating Westfield, see, now we're trying to do that too. So
It's about timing.
no, right. Well, that's
About
what I was getting
timing.
at the timing early on, that if we have a vacated building, maximum done,
Mhm.
especially, the demo stuff and the asbestos, the abatement, and been working on other things.
Will we have to renovate Westfield to accommodate that?
Not a huge amount of renovation. Things that they're gonna need to do is they're gonna need to put in like IT drops into some of the spaces that don't currently have it. So that way they can, put in their smart boards and stuff like that. So that's the majority of it. There's not, school staff is gonna be able to manage that component. We're not gonna need to bring in a contractor to do additional renovation, because that's one of the things we're being purposeful about is what do we actually need to do to Westfield Avenue? Because we don't want them to expend money and resources on putting in certain renovations that we're gonna turn and rip out a year later, right? That makes no sense.
Absolutely.
So we're in very close communication around all of those things, so that way we're maximizing what needs to be done in that location. But it sounds like it's fairly minimal in what they're gonna need to do in order to be able to get Westfield, to get the 4th grade over there.
Does that include like hiring an additional nurse or additional administration?
That would all be handled within the Board of Ed operating budget.
Yeah.
Yep. That's not in the
Not a
project.
building, yeah, right.
Right, on the building.
Not a direct cost.
All right, thank you. We'll now move on the agenda. Item 14 is unfinished business for town council action, and we have none, so we'll move on to item 15A, consideration and action on a resolution supporting the whole milk choice in schools. Ms. Gloria, if you could go over this, please.
This was the request from your public comment last month, and I essentially pulled this resolution directly from that website he had given you. So this was the requested resolution. I will say he called into Winnie yesterday when I was on Winnie, and he was very excited that you guys were going to be considering this. So I did want to give you that feedback.
people wouldn't have gone through the efforts that he's going through. They came into the Board of Ed, came to the council, they try to talk to people, come up to the podium, he did it. So I gotta applaud him for that.
And normally I would read through the resolution, but considering the time and how much we have left, this resolution is available on the town's website if you look at the agenda for tonight's meeting.
And just a quick note, the last portion of that tells where it's all gonna be distributed to, so this is gonna go to the legislature and agricultural commissions and
Yes.
all that, to cover all bases.
So I don't believe I got a motion on
not.
the floor yet. Okay.
Oh, I'll make that motion, I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Okay. So motion has been made by Mr. Cottula, seconded by Ms. George, to adopt a resolution supporting whole milk choice in schools. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 I abstain.
Opposed? So motion passes. We have 7-4 and 1 abstention. Ray did. Yep.
I was an aye.
He said I was an aye.
Yeah, he got it.
Very good.
Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda is item 15B, consideration and action on a resolution to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Town of Killenly Professional Technical Employee Union. Can I get a motion to adopt this resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula. Do I have a second? Seconded by Ms. Barclay. Ms. Gloria, could you go over this, please?
Yes, so this is our, the professional technical union encompasses pretty much our assistants to department heads and more of our technical staff in nature. Their agreement, what you have before you is really just a wage adjustment for the next 3 years. I will say that this union, with regards to their the benefits that are reflected in there, they are paying the highest cost shares for employee health benefits on both employee and family coverage. They have the highest contribution into their pension. Really, they have, we didn't have really any other angst around any of the other components within this contract. So I felt comfortable with moving forward with just a wage-only request, which was what the union had requested. The union came forward and requested just a wage only. And we really, I evaluate every union contract with my collective team to determine whether or not there's any clauses, as well as I have our labor attorney review them to determine if there's any clauses within there that we really need to look at revising. This group, the salary continuation on any workers' comps is only 30 days. We have another union that's 9 months. So they have been the kind of the leader in a lot of the changes to union contracts. The wage adjustment that we have before you in evaluating where our current staff is currently at wage-wise, many of them are below and some of them are well below median wage for their position based on salary survey that I've done across municipalities that are of similar size and demographics as Killingly. I had reviewed this with the personnel subcommittee, and they had originally tasked me with specific guidelines. So in the first year, there's a 3%. The second year is a 2.75, and then it does bring it back in line with the other union contracts at 2.25% for the third year. Those two higher year percentages really brings those wages closer to that median and makes them more competitive. What we're seeing is as those positions change, they are significantly harder to fill and harder to to be competitive. So I'm trying to get those positions into a more competitive place. So the request is the union did ratify this proposal on March 10th. So I'm looking for ratification from the council.
And the Personnel Subcommittee did recommend this for the full council to approve. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is 15C, consideration and action on a resolution to accept the proposed license amendment from T-Mobile regarding an extension of their current license for use of the town's communication facility at 79 Putnam Pike. Ms. can I get a motion to adopt this resolution?
I'll make this motion.
Motion has been made by Mr. Catula, seconded by Ms. Barclay, and this did come before the fiscal subcommittee, and the fiscal subcommittee did recommend that the full council approve this. Ms. Gloria.
And just really quickly, so the T-Mobile is going to be expanding the number of antennas on the on the tower, which provides the additional revenue of $9,000 per year. This was the original agreement that actually dealt with the construction of the actual tower. In that original agreement, there was a clause for shared rent, which meant that the town was supposed to share a portion of any other agreements that we have, which we do have other cell agreements on this that we receive rent from. The town has taken that 20% annually and put it into a separate fund. However, by the time we started receiving other rents, the original leaseholder was no longer the leaseholder any longer. It had been transferred to another company. We didn't have good contacts as to where that funding was supposed to be transmitted to, so the town's been sitting on this funding. This agreement settles that shared rent clause. We do a final settlement payout, the $62,000, which the town already has set aside. It's actually substantially less than what the actual shared rent calculation was over the entire duration of the time that we've collected shared rent, but it is what we believe is attributable to this actual leaseholder. So T-Mobile has only been they have been on the pole since 2016, I think, was when they took over this actual lease. So that is what they're, and they've agreed to that. Actually, that calculation is even low because we did that calculation based on June of last year. And when they came back to us and said, oh, no, we really need to do this, we said, well, we have to give you the credit for the next 6 months. And they went, no. We're okay with the number that you've already proposed. You don't need to increase it. Just get this settled. So it's a fair and equitable settlement. And so the new rental amount does put them in line with all the other leaseholders, leasees on that pole.
Thank you very much.
So do we own that pole now?
We do. We've always owned it.
But we don't owe anybody. We own all the rents that come in from
Correct.
From that.
Correct, yes.
Whereas before
we had a shared,
right?
with this one agreement, we had a shared. They had this agreement, Omnidata, when they constructed the pole, and for the first 10 years, they didn't have to pay any rent to us because they were recouping the construction costs of it. And so they were the ones that had that shared rent in there. This completely eliminates that language out of the contract completely, so we no longer have to share rents with anybody. We fully own the pole.
So T-Mobile is paying $9,000 a year?
They'll be paying $25,000 to almost $26,000 a year, an additional $9,000 from what they're currently paying us.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is 15D, consideration and action on a resolution to adopt goals for the duration of the terms of the office of the current town council. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made by Mr. Catula,
Patty George, I'll second.
seconded by Ms. George. Now, Ms. Colorio, I am to understand this is for the term ending November 30th of 2023, correct?
Correct.
Because some of the council members
Correct.
will be here 2 years beyond that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It's for the existing council that's seated here.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Looking over this, this is basically, these were the goals that we had reached during our goal-setting meeting last month. I don't know if there's any questions, comments anyone has. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll move on in the agenda. Next item up is 15E, consideration and action on the resolution to elect the standard allowance for revenue loss under the American Rescue Plan Act funding final rule. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
Patty George, I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Motion has been made by Ms. George, seconded by Ms. Barclay. This did come before the fiscal subcommittee, and the fiscal subcommittee did recommend that the full council approve this. Ms. Gloria, if you could go over this, please.
Yep, so the U.S. Treasury originally had given us a calculation to determine how much of our ARP funds could be allocated to what's considered revenue loss, which when you allocate it to revenue loss, it alleviates some of the constraints on what the funding can be used for. It's then allowed to be utilized for any purpose that your government would normally expend resources on towards any governmental service. They changed that. They added a component where now they have a standard allowance. So essentially, any ARP funding that you receive, 10 million or less, can be considered revenue loss. The town makes the election for standard allowance. And really what this does is it doesn't expend any funds, it doesn't appropriate any funds, but what it does allow is it does allow the council to, and the town subsequently, to not have to fall under very restrictive eligibility requirements, some of which hasn't necessarily been fully articulated by the U.S. Treasury. So one of the hazards that we run into when we're allocating under the eligibility requirements, if the U.S. Treasury, after we've expended the funds, comes back and says, oh no, we don't believe that that met this eligibility requirement, they can claw the money back, right? Even though we've already spent the money or we've given it to a third party somewhere to spend the money, right? So this allows the town council, the town, to allocate those funds without having those additional constraints around very specific eligibility requirements. So it also really streamlines the reporting requirement and process for this tremendously. So the recommendation is to elect the standard allowance. It makes all the ARPA funds that we've received eligible as standard allowance and considered revenue loss, and then is eligible to be used towards any government service.
And just for clarification, the town already has the ARPA funds.
We have half of them. So we've received, to date, we have received almost $2 million. We will receive the remaining half in June of this year.
Thank you.
But none of it has been expended. None of the American Rescue Plan Act funds have been expended. Part of those are before you tonight for consideration in setting a public hearing. We have not expended not a dime of the American Rescue Plan Act funding. That is just sitting reserved right now because it has not been appropriated in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you.
What about any other funds that we've received?
The COVID funds, that was part of the finance director's report. There was a separate report that detailed all of the COVID funds. We received 2 batches of COVID funds, one which was very initial in just. Yeah, it was like 13,000, and then the other one was about 163,000 was the secondary batch. That's in a detailed report that you have in your packet from the finance director on exactly how those funds were expended.
I do have one question. One of them, I know it's getting late, but I'll ask in an email.
Okay, that's fine.
Any other questions, comments? And we do have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is 15F, consideration and action on a resolution setting the date of June 14th, 2022 for a public hearing on the proposed resolution to appropriate the American Rescue Act funding. And in this resolution, the appropriations would be for the WPCA Reynolds Street Sewer Replacement Project at $795,510, for police office building improvements relocation at $800,000, for economic development Phase 2 environmental assessment at $155,000, for Quinnebog Valley Senior Center HVAC repairs at $4,700, for TVCCA facility improvements at $20,000, for ARC organizational study at $7,500, and for access agency window replacements at $21,000, for a total appropriation of $1,803,710. And also understand that this isn't the actual appropriation of the funding. This is just to set a public hearing based on that resolution with that, at that funding level. So this wouldn't be the final decision to expend those funds.
So it's just a discussion, public discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
And those amounts are in there listed so the public can see where we were planning to spend some of that money. Any further questions,
Were you
comments?
looking for a motion? I don't have a
Oh,
motion.
I didn't have a motion or a second. Can I get a motion to adopt this resolution setting the date for the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula. Second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. George. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on in the agenda to item 15G. Consideration and action on a resolution to request United Services and Wyndham 4-H to provide presentations on their representative American Rescue Act funding applications. Can I get a motion to adopt this resolution? Motion has been made by Ms. Murphy.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Cottula. The fiscal subcommittee did pass this to the council, just requesting that the council would reach out to these two entities to ask them to do presentations, just to get a little more information in regards to the request for the ARPA funding.
So this is just a request that there's, because they haven't responded back, if we don't have a date.
Yeah, this is just to formally, instruct me to go and request them to give a presentation. I would look to probably see if I could get it for your May agenda.
Special.
Sorry, either the special or the regular meeting.
Mr. Grandelsky.
So I'm looking at the Wyndham 4-H dam reconstruction. Is there have to be like multiple towns that would be contributing to this? That's what.
They have, put in ARP applications.
They submitted applications to basically every surrounding town, to try, their dam construction cost is like $1 million, and they've gone to request, from each surrounding town, a $50,000 request to try to recoup some of that construction cost.
Okay. That's what I kind of thought.
And I don't know how many other towns have actually proceeded with funding that. So it'll be good to get their feedback on where they are with that, and also that cost was only a portion of the overall. Their application reflects a investment of about $1 million. The ARPA requests were only about $250,000 of that, so how are they meeting the gap of the difference? Because the ARP funds have to be expended by December 31st of 2026.
Have to be expended. Oh, okay.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that they can complete the project in that timeline.
So United Services is pretty much the same thing, they're just hitting up the surrounding towns for.
No, so United Services is different. United Services application is specifically for creating a new service for Killingly businesses. It's an employee assistance program to help businesses that may have employees that have had, challenges with, whether it's mental health or whether it's financial concerns, and creating an employee assistance program that small businesses can have they can refer their employees to seek help. So they're looking at this. Their request is to create that program and it would cover 2 years of cost for that program. I think part of their presentation would be to understand what happens after the 2 years. What happens? How does that get funded going forward? Are they looking to then bill the cost to the Killingly businesses? And typically as an employer, we subscribe to a service that provides employee assistance, and there's a cost associated with that. How are they looking to manage that cost to small businesses in Killingly?
Thanks.
Any further questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on in the agenda to item 15H, consideration and action on a resolution adopting the revised library fines and fees policy. Can I get a motion to adopt this?
I'll make that motion.
Motion has been made by Mr. Cottula. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. George. I know we've discussed this. This has been brought up to the council previously. It's also come before fiscal subcommittee twice. As I had spoke before during the presentation, fiscal subcommittee did have concerns. And the majority of the concerns that were brought up by the fiscal subcommittee were addressed in this, the revised fines and fees policy. And one of my big concerns was the possibility of less material being available if there's no late fees. But the fact that they've reduced the amount of material that can be taken out at a time should help with that. There's also, as was brought up, where a user's card gets locked, where if they have late fees. Well, they have fees for material that hasn't been returned. Yes. Fees for lost material. That's the word I was looking for. It's getting late. So the fiscal subcommittee did recommend to the council that the full council approve this. So at this point, I don't know if anyone has any more questions, comments. I know this was discussed quite a bit earlier. Mr. Wood, do you have anything?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. And we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? And one abstention. Michelle. So the motion carries. Mr. Wood, you were an aye?
That's correct.
Okay. Motion carries 6 ayes, 1 nay, and 1 abstention. Moving on in the agenda, next item up is 15I, consideration and action on a resolution setting a date of May 10th, 2022 for a public hearing on the proposed affordable housing plan. Now, this is just to set a public hearing. This isn't the council actually approving this approving the plan itself.
Still need a motion to,
Can I get a motion to?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion has been made by Ms. George, seconded by Ms. Barclay, to adopt this resolution setting the date for the public hearing. Is there any discussion, question, comments?
I have one question concerning, this is also, May 10th is the townwide referendum, correct?
It is, yes, and, had the due date for this plan to go to the state is by June 1st. So otherwise, I would look to, recommend that it go into June, but also, sometimes holding two public hearings on two very different topics can be challenging when you're doing it on the same night. So this would spread them out into two different meetings. People can also submit public comment for public hearings by email as well. So it would still allow someone to vote and also have their, they could submit their public comment in advance.
Very good, thank you.
Now, as far as having notice to the public, because the fact we're having two things on the same date, I know that can get really confusing for the public. And I know as far as having notice for this, we'd be limited as far as to what we could put up as far as signage.
Oh, for a public hearing?
Yeah.
We have to post it in the paper.
Yeah.
5 days in advance.
Yeah.
And, it would be on our website, it would be, on our Facebook page, we would put a post on our Facebook page. I usually, I would remind everyone on Winnie when I go on Winnie, the day before. So, those are our avenues that we look to get that information out. Anybody who wants to share the information, share the links, that's always a good thing to help spread the word on whatever platforms, that's always a good thing to do. But yeah, and it, again, it's just that good reminder that people can submit that public comment via email as well, and if they, can't, you can't be in two places at the same time.
Sure. Any further comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to the agenda. Next item up is 16, council member reports and comments. Mr. Wood, would you like to start, please?
Sure. So the Historic District Commission met. They continue to discuss their brochures and the edits that need to be done to that. And they also discussed a do's and don'ts placard, and I wish I could remember exactly what that was about, but I failed to take some notes on that one, so that is my fault. I also attended the fiscal subcommittee and personnel subcommittees, which we've discussed all of what they've discussed in the last month. Tonight, and then the zoning board of appeals, it was for the 46 Pleasant View Drive wanted to add a 2-bay garage to their home. They eventually did approve that with a change modification to the property to subtract about a couple feet as well. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grandelski, could you go?
Conservation, they talked about a forest management plan for Chase Reservoir. That seems to be a very costly venture. So it seems to be on the agenda. They talked about bus tours, and there's some discussion about the October walks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whitehead. Okay. Ms. Murphy?
Agriculture, they talked about the classes, bees, goats, foraging classes, garden club, and they did mention whole milk. And WPCS, they're on permit, they're on budget. They talked about the new law where they passed that you're not going to collect on a lien unless it's over $10,000. And I don't think that's passed yet, right? That's coming. So it's one of those things they wanted us to look into it. And then they voted on a new garage door, paying for a new garage door.
Thank you. Ms. Clore, do you know anything about that as far as the not being able to collect liens unless it's over $10,000?
For the water, for the wastewater, sewer department.
For WPCA?
It's not clicking anything off the top of my head. I would have to go and double check that. So
Yeah, if it's in the agenda or if anybody wants it, they can just reach out and I'll find out what it is.
Oh, good.
But he was concerned about it.
Thank you.
Was it?
Mr. Cottule?
Mary covered all of the stuff with KMS project with the with what's going on with that. The Permanent Building Committee met, and they had 5 architectural pamphlets for the Westfield Ave project, and they are meeting Monday to interview 3 of them.
We've already gone over, as Mr. Wood said, everything from Personnel Subcommittee and Fiscal Subcommittee, and the Inland Wetlands Watercourse Commission meeting was canceled. Ms. George?
I attended multiple BOE meetings. Norm went over that. And then I attended the NECOG meeting with Mary. We were supposed to have a presentation, but there were major technical difficulties. But it was very nice because it was back in person after 2 years. It was at the Putnam Municipal Complex. And then we basically talked about, it was kind of like throwing ideas around for good ideas, regional ideas for the grant money coming down from the federal level, and making sure that, you know, get the biggest bang for your buck for the different towns to kind of work together. So, and that's an ongoing conversation. And that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Barclay?
There was a special workshop for Oops. There was a special workshop for the planning and zoning on March 28th. They discussed the zoning regulation change for garages and storage facilities on otherwise unoccupied properties. They were trying to determine what structures and what size would be able to be built on the property. And there will be application in April and a public hearing on May. They originally had wanted the square footage to be 1,000, but decided they would increase it to 1,200 square feet. That will be in May. They also discussed the 5 Mile River overlay district and proposed changes to the regulations because it only covered the 5 Mile River and some arbitrary areas, and they thought that all of the waterfronts should be protected, and they wanted to outline all of the stipulations for future board members to comply with. They also were looking at there are other endangered species that live in other areas that aren't covered by the 5 Mile district overlay. Cannabis zoning regulations. So the state has a lot of stipulations for the cannabis. It's a lottery, and you have to pay $500,000 to be put into the lottery. There's restrictions to commercial zones, and also that application will be in April, and a special hearing will be held in May regarding the cannabis zoning regulations. And then also the last thing they discussed was the town of Killingly's policy for sale of town land. And they had the legal counsel come up with some wording, and they decided that if the property was given to them, they should not try to profit off of it. But that was about it for that meeting. I think, Jason, you attended the other meeting.
Yes, I believe, was it that March 21st meeting?
Yes.
I don't have the notes with me for that. I know one of the things they discussed was someone was looking to put self-storage. Yep, and that did get approved. Douglas Construction did do another presentation. My memory serves me, that got continued. And trying to think what else was on the agenda for that night. It was. Yeah. I apologize, I don't remember what else was on that one.
I think Douglas Construction was probably the biggest.
Yeah, that was very time consuming. It took quite a bit of time.
So I had the Killingly Housing Authority meeting today. I'm gonna combine last month's with this month's, cause pretty much the same thing. So, for Section 8, housing, they, have 50 to 52 people on the list, and, they have to send out purge letters every year. And people must respond by May, so they know how many people still are looking for affordable housing. The contractor started working on the gutters, but he was injured, so the gutters have stopped. They have a new CHFA assistant manager who is probably going to possibly investigate this contractor or make sure that he gets the job done, because it's been being held over for a long time. And they're still looking at having solar panels installed, and they're looking for a different solar installer. They're supposed to check with the BOE in regards to the installer that they used, because the BOE had mentioned quite a few times that they are not getting very much break on their electric bill with all of that solar. So what else? They had an engineering study completed, and basically the man who came, even though they haven't gotten anything in writing yet, said that the damage to the buildings was from the drainage. They didn't have the water draining away from the property far enough. So next year they'll be applying for grant funding to have those buildings fixed. They did apply this year, but the funding went to Fairfield County. And they looking for grants for capital needs assessment. They have a new cook, and they did have their audit, which came through fine, and they increased the price of the rent by $65, and they do also have a the state wanted the minimum rent to be increased, so it went up to $245, and they're having problems because a lot of people's income it's more than 30%, and then they get dinged from the state if they charge more than 30%, so they're kind of they can't win. And because it's state-owned property, they they don't have any of the other grants, like HUD grants, that other low-income housing units are able to use. And they've had quite a turnaround in the congregate housing, which has decreased their revenue. There's 43 units, and there's been 14 people that have, 14 of units that have been emptied or been refilled in the past year.
I have a question for going back to the cannabis, the $500,000 to get into the lottery, is that like a non-refundable?
It sure sounds like it's non-refundable.
So where's that money goes? It goes to the state then?
Goes to the state. So the state require any potential developer or retailer, that's the upfront, just to gain entry into the lottery.
No.
That's an expensive
So
lottery
if they
ticket.
so they put up the $500,000, if they win, if they're one of the lottery winners, do they get to use that $500,000?
No.
No, so that's just.
Buying a lottery ticket.
That's- Wow.
Buying a lottery ticket.
That's
A lot of money in it, though.
Exactly, which is why they can put the price tag of $500,000.
Yeah.
But I will say that does eliminate the kind of the fly-by-nights are the ones that don't have a capital stack to put in this. When you put a price tag like that to get in the entry into the lottery, they have to have control or secure control of the site. They have to, there's a lot of criteria that they have to have in place. They have to have an identified bank that they can do banking with. Not every bank in the state of Connecticut, they can't bank with them. Because cannabis is illegal federally, so they have to have a bank that they can bank with in order to enter into the lottery. There's a lot of components that they have to have in order to enter the lottery, and it really does eliminate those that may just go, woohoo, let's go into, retail cannabis or cannabis grow, right? It really forces it into those that have the real capital stack to get in it. But yeah, $500,000 is nothing to sneeze at when it comes to that, and it all goes to the state.
Thank you.
And any revenue that the town receives from that 3% is restricted by state statute. We can only use it for very specific purposes.
Drug addiction being one of them, probably.
Mental health, drug addiction, and educational components, and rehab for released transitional people, and very, very small minor component around public safety. Very small.
Create a problem and we'll give you a solution. So then potentially there's really no benefits to the town.
All right. And moving on in the agenda, item 17, executive session. We have nothing. 18, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
A motion has been made by Mr. Grandelski, seconded by Mr. Kratula. Sorry, Mr. Wood. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? This meeting is adjourned.